All right, we'll get this thing going. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:30 and I'd like to call the City of Colwood Council meeting Thursday, January 23rd, 2023 to order at 6:30. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Lekwungen speaking people. And we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. May I get a motion for approval of the recommendation under approval of agenda, please? Oh, Councillor Day and Councillor Joe. No. What I'm going to do, I'll vote and then we'll, and if there's enough people that want to change it, then we will. Okay, a seconder. Okay, Councillor Grove. All not opposed to this. Opposed.
I'm feeling concerned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I made the motion to approve the agenda, but then I heard another member of council who wanted to propose an amendment. And I think it might be simpler to propose an amended agenda than to amend something that we've already passed. So I withdraw my motion and defer to others if they're all right with that idea.
Okay, Councillor Jordison, are you proposing an amendment to the agenda? What's that? I'll put you on. Councillor Jordison. Speak up.
Okay, so at the end of the day, I don't really have a concern on how we do this, but I just need the public and everybody at this table to understand that this agenda is too full for one meeting. And the subject of this meeting has some very important decisions from council, and I don't feel that we've been afforded the opportunity for ample review or the appropriate time to ask questions that we require in making good decisions. And I think it's in everybody's best interest to defer 10.4, 11.1, and 11.2 to another agenda. And I also want to mention that if this continues to happen with the agenda being so packed, that this will be a regular thing. Thank you.
We can always defer them anyways if we don't get to them. Councillor Jordison, so. Okay, Councillor Jantzen.
Sorry, was that a motion? Is there a seconder? I'm not going to second that particular motion, but I do have some comments.
Comments on the motion? On the amended motion? Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yes. So can I get a seconder for the amended motion? Okay. There we go. Councillor Day has seconded. All those in favor? Oh, no, pardon me. Sorry, discussion. It's discussion. Yes, please. Councillor Jantzen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a voluminous agenda without a doubt, and I think this council is seeing perhaps the byproduct of going to a bi-weekly meeting as opposed to a weekly meeting. And this might be the downside to that. However, having said that, I agree with your sense of it, Your Worship. We plow through as much as we can and we defer what we don't get to. If we don't get past item 5.1 and we defer the rest of the evening, you know, I'm fine with that, but we do need to give it the college try and do the city's business. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Ward.
I understand the sentiment behind the emotion, so I don't want to dismiss that out of hand. I think the, you know, it is certainly a very packed agenda, and a number of the items on here are very key and require potentially a significant amount of discussion. But I do, you know, lean towards trying to get through what we can with the knowledge that at the end of the day we can defer things we don't get to, and you know, we don't necessarily need to rush if we don't feel that it's in the best interest of residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll put it, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amended motion? Okay, Councillor Jordison, Councillor Day, and Councillor Olson, all those opposed. And it's Councillor Grove, Mayor Kobayashi, Councillor Ward, and Councillor Jantzen. Now back to the original motion. All those in favor? Whoops. Oh, all right. Okay, I do need a new motion for approval of the agenda. Councillor Jantzen, seconder, Councillor Ward, all in favor? And opposed? Okay, Councillor Olson, Councillor Day, and Councillor Jordison. Okay. So just get on with the mayor's message. Okay, I just want to point out we're, as a new council, our focus is on listening to residents to understand your wants, needs, and expectations. And there's three things that I want to encourage all residents to take advantage of, and that's the upcoming engagement opportunities that we're having. The first one is the citizen survey. It's IPSCO survey. Watch for a postcard to arrive in your mailbox early next week with your unique code to participate in the Colwood Citizen Survey. It takes about 15 minutes. It's going to help us understand your needs and expectations, and as we make decisions about our community. The second event that we're going to have is that there's an ideas fair that we're going to have. And it's at Royal Bay Secondary School on February 11th. That's a Saturday. I believe it's from, forget the timing of that one. It goes from about 11 in the morning till 7 in the evening. It's going to be an exciting interactive opportunity for Colwood residents to engage in conversations, share your ideas with council, staff, and each other on a number of topics. And specifically, the topics that we're looking at are seniors, youth, health, arts and culture, traffic and roads, sewer service, and any other big ideas that you may have. And the third thing, I would really like to encourage the citizens to volunteer as committee members. We've got our first 4 committees that we've announced right now. After the ideas fair, we want to establish the other committees. We don't know which is the best way to accomplish some of these things. Are they select committees, or do we want to put it under our strategic plan? So I believe it's on our website now. I don't know if we've published it in the paper, but applications are due by February 17th. And so, you know, be part of a committee in the areas that interest you. So the areas are like that are available right now are for parks, active transportation, environment, waterfront stewardship, heritage, planning, land use, and Board of Variance. If you need any more information about these opportunities, just visit our website at colwood.ca. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just, I wanted to speak up about the public participation to encourage people to be involved. Sometimes I've heard from the public that they've been discouraged when they've tried to provide input. And I just wanted to share, I learned something quite a few years ago from a planner I was working with who told me that there are certain times when your input has more effect than others. So these opportunities, the survey, the ideas fair, and participating in, or even just being more interested in the committee work that's going to happen here, is one of those special opportunities to be more involved and for your input to bear more fruit perhaps down the line. So I'm just in support of the mayor's request to get the community to engage with us and help us get it right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Day. Okay, adoption of regular council meeting minutes from January 9th, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, motion, Councillor Grove, seconder, Councillor Olson, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you very much. Public participation. Can I get an idea by a show of hands, how many people wish to speak tonight? We're just trying to determine. Six, and then plus one on the. So I had a request for an extension. So I was seeing the number of speakers that we have tonight at 7. That's, so okay, that was 14. 14 times 2 is that's 20. So 14 minutes. Okay, no, that's fine. So one speaker has asked for an additional 2 minutes. So it requires unanimous council approval. So could I get a motion for the extension? So Councillor Jordison, Councillor Grove, all in favor? Are there any opposed? Okay, unanimous. So that speaker who has asked for the extra 2 minutes, you have it. Okay, so I'll first of all, I'll welcome Mr. Corey Berger from who's online right now. I think he's our first speaker. Over to you, Corey.
Thank you very much. As you can probably hear from my voice, you can hear why I'm not joining you in person this evening. I'm here to speak to you about item 10.4, which is the upcoming active transportation network plan. We at Capital Bike are very excited about the prospect of this plan. It's been a long time coming. It's going to be a great change for Colwood, you know, and the pieces that it offers are quite useful. However, I did want to highlight one last minute little piece that council might want to consider in how that plan is drafted. Last week, the Capital Regional District looked at a unified all ages and abilities bikeway definition, as well as a map. And one of the things we noted in our review of Colwood's draft plan last week was that there wasn't a great deal of the definitions that were not easily found within the document. So what we'd like to do, just to propose to you tonight, is that you approve this plan because it is vitally important to keep it moving and get it going, but that you make 2 requests to staff to start on right away so that you have consistency with whatever comes out of the Capital Regional District. The first one involves amending page 30, which is the cycling facility types, as well as section 6.1 that just identifies clearly what is and what isn't all ages and abilities. And then the second one is an amendment to map 5, the long-term cycling network, again, to clearly separate out what is all ages and abilities and what isn't, so that when your staff go
30 seconds remaining.
So when your staff go forward to speak to the Capital Regional District, they know the will of council. Essentially, they don't have to guess at why, which of these roads does council want to be AAA, and what does council think is actually AAA. So those are just 2 pieces we'd like to propose that you ask staff to take away, work with stakeholders on, and then bring back as amendments to the ATNP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Corey. And now I'll ask for other members of the public. I just there's 3 attachments to the agenda with people that have submitted other comments. So I just want to remind everyone, comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. That's Bylaw 1913, CD 33, 2350 Souk Road. At this point in time, if the first person wants to come up, just identify who you are, your address. Who wants to go first?
Colwood City Council. Hello, my name is Chris Millington. I live at 553 Delora Drive and have been a resident of Colwood for 35 years. I'm here to talk to you about the proposed Royal Beach Amphitheater by Seacliff Properties. Excuse me. I've attended most of the public meetings at Royal Bay High School and subsequent community presentations of the development of Royal Bay and Royal Beach. The original sketches of the community area of Royal Beach presented by Seacliff Properties had a turn of the century bandstand in the middle of the main commercial area. I verbally mentioned that this type of artistic performance area was very out of date, extremely limiting in its scope for presentations and general usage, along with written comments suggesting an amphitheater to Seacliff Properties. An amphitheater is an open air theater where the audience would face the ocean, see artistic presentations, and audience seating is built into the side of the hill. Presentations could include live music, theater, dance, and combinations of all. This would be an absolutely breathtaking setting. The area could not only be used for artistic presentations, but also as an area where members of the community could sell crafts, visual arts, farmer markets, an all-purpose community area. Subsequently, sketched by Seacliff, if you look at your hand, or you haven't been given a handout, but when you get it, you'll see the sketch of sketch 1 and sketch 2. Was proposed and placed on their website, and it showed the actual creation of an amphitheater. With Seacliff creating this sketch and posting it on their website, it was showing that they were listening and they were showing some type of approval to the concept.
30-second warning.
Okay. Wow. Okay, on November 28th, Seacliff Properties made a presentation on Royal Beach Parks at Royal Beach. This was an open presentation to the public. There were approximately 4 representatives from Seacliff Properties. Marta, one of the spokeswomen for Seacliff, took us to the proposed site, and she said there would be no electrical power, no road access, no parking, and that a solo violinist would be the type of presentation that could be presented. In this rendering, there is no technical infrastructure. This is the second thing that you will see on the handout. So right now,
That's 2
we,
minutes.
the residents of Colwood, have a golden opportunity to create a legacy venue in a world-class location, benefiting our community for generations to come. A professionally built amphitheater with proper infrastructure and funding for performers, all paid by the developer, would create a lasting entertainment venue for the city and add much to the cultural enrichment of our community. Council, I urge you to demand more from Seacliff Properties for the development of Colwood's premier priceless waterfront community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Milligan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jantzen.
Sorry, I felt council may benefit from Mr. Millington's expertise in this area, and I just wondered if he had more to say, because I would be happy to recommend another couple of minutes or whatever. I'll make that motion if you have something further to say, Mr. Millington.
Well, we'll
So
have to
make that-
vote on it first.
I'll make that motion for some additional time for Mr. Millington. Thank you.
Seconded by Council Ward. All in favor? It's unanimous. You got a couple more minutes. 1 minute and 30 seconds, actually.
Okay, to just give you a bit of background on myself, B Music degree, BCTFs, was in the military. I've been a professional musician my whole life, have toured the world extensively, performing on music in different types of stages. I look at Langford has got their sports area. I think this is a golden opportunity for the West Shore and Colwood to do something for the arts. An amphitheater is pretty not like a theater. It's not going to have the expenses. And I think it's open to a lot of possibilities. Anybody have any questions of me? I could go more into my speech if you want. Okay, if I'm gonna leave it like that. I think you probably get the gist.
Councillor Olson.
Yes, hi.
I've seen you play live
Okay.
and you're fantastic. What would
Thank you.
you like to see there? I think we need to have more conversations with, you know, people that are involved in the arts and entertainers. What do you envision that theater looking like?
Well, it's an amphitheater. If you look at,
you know, you can go back 2,000 years and see what the Romans did. They're open concept with open seating. It's concrete. You don't have to take care of it, but you need to have the technical infrastructure of power, road access. The second sketch that you'll see in this, there's no infrastructure to go in to bring equipment in. There's no washrooms for performers. These are the typical things that, as I say, in the Beacon Hill Bandstand, which is 20 years of age, has got all these things plus a built-in sound system. So an amphitheater, I think, is something that our city could do and would work, rather than something like the Royal Theatre.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. Mr. Millington, I see that you were working from a written set of notes. I wonder if you would be willing to share those with
It's a
staff?
flat copy, so everyone-
Oh, okay, perfect. Excellent. That's
And it
wonderful.
has the sketches that I'm talking about, and you'll see the difference between the initial sketch that Seacliff made and then the second sketch that they made.
Great.
And it's a downgrading.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. My name is John English. I'm with the Royal Bay Homeowners Association. Have to say, our association is in total agreement with the previous speaker. We were on that tour as well, and we were told the same thing by the tour leaders that Seacliff has changed its mind. It's downgraded its views for what it's going to do for that natural amphitheater area. That's just one concern. Now I'd like to start what we came here to talk about. Okay, as you may recall, a large number of people in our community were very upset some years ago when the then city council and city staff allowed district properties to manipulate and exploit the city's mixed use designation of the property at 360 Latoria. What was supposed to be a neighborhood house never occurred. What we see now is, in fact, high density residential large building with one very small corner allocated for commercial, and there's another large entirely 100% residential building planned right behind it. That's also been approved. This makes a mockery of the OCP. It displays incredible disrespect for the city and its council and its citizens. We're quite concerned that this all came about through fragmented decision making. And we see the same danger of fragmented decision making actually ruining Colwood's waterfront lands.
30-second warning.
That's my first 30-second. Okay. The city's vision and goals for its future are in danger of being destroyed by similar fragmented thinking and fragmented approvals. You're being asked this evening to consider Seacliff Reliance Partnership's parks plan for the city's waterfront lands. It's obvious to anyone who gives any thought to it that a parks plan must be effectively integrated with the plans for commercial and public amenities in order for the city of Colwood to have any hope of achieving its goals and vision for the waterfront lands. The parks plan that's been submitted to you for consideration fails to demonstrate how it will effectively contribute to the city achieving its vision and goals.
That's 2 minutes.
Yesterday, I forwarded an email to each member of council attaching a document prepared by the Project for Public Places organization. And the document that was attached to that was how to transform a waterfront. This organization has been working for 50 years with over 3,500 communities worldwide. They have an incredible history of success and effectiveness. And if you read that, if you had the opportunity and time to read that document that I sent you, which I would encourage you all to do, you'd see that the requirements that they identify for success to make a place publicly vibrant and attractive are not there in what Seacliff and Reliance have proposed. What the only two spots in the parks plan the Seacliff and Reliance have proposed that will have any value in attracting anybody to the waterfront is the plaza area, which is very small, and also the beach itself. And I do have to recognize that they did show that there would be on their drawing that there'd be 72 car parking provided for that area, but I don't know if that's enough. So we've had 3 very cordial meetings with representatives of Seacliff and Reliance. And we would like to, as an organization, offer our assistance to both the city and to these developers to flesh out development plans for the Colwood's waterfront lands so that they work for the city, they work for Colwood citizens, and they work for Seacliff and Reliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. English. Next, please.
All right. My name is Jack Murray. I live on Canning Court and prepared notes here for myself today so that I stay on track and within the 2-minute time frame. I'd like to begin by congratulating you all on the successful bid at council members and mayor. I haven't been here since you last won, so I appreciate all the work and effort that you put in for the public. So thank you very much. I'm here today as a resident of Colwood who's also very concerned about the development plans for the Royal Beach area. Mostly I'm concerned about the developers who seem to have taken advantage of some of our past council members. And I'm concerned that their tactics will continue. And I can only hope that the new members see clearly through those ways. Although I'm concerned about some of the specific elements on some of the plans that I've seen today, some of the proposed trails, a new road mysteriously appearing late last year, I'm here to speak on the bigger picture, which is trust with the developers and making sure that they are committed to what they say they're going to build. So I'm not here to plead for modifications and I highly doubt that's going to be the last time that this plan is changed, as I've seen many changes so far in some of the proposed plans and what's been approved. In fact, I've even had a representative from Seacliff come to my house to tell me that the area overlooking section 9 on the map now, the scramble, would be donated back to the city of Colwood as green space. And it was noted that it would not be possible to build there anyways. Now I see a road and potentially houses being proposed to be built there. There was also a recent public meeting that was held where the developers told the attendees that there would no longer be an amphitheater or a very scaled back version of that, which basically a field in my mind and a park.
30-second warning.
All right. So things like pubs or local shops and restaurants that were in the original proposal, I believe have now disappeared. But I still see these on the park plans today. I still see this nice looking amphitheater that I don't believe they're going to build. So my request is to please delay any new permit or change submissions until a clear plan has been provided and approved and committed to. And I don't know if there's some way of adding, some form of penalty or anything like that to anything that gets changed after it's been approved, unless it really warrants
It's 2 minutes.
or it's outside the builder's control. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'll be back.
Thanks very much, Ms. Murray. Next speaker, please.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Trevor Everly, 3535 Promenade. President. I just had a couple of comments around item 10.1, the compensation issue. The first relates to fiduciary responsibilities. I had a look at the parameters that the consultant has put before you. And I don't see any reference to balance sheet items. In other words, where is Colwood relative to the other targets in terms of assets and liabilities that you have fiduciary responsibility for? So you may want to speak with her with respect to that. The other comment I had relates to how much of your time is being contributed in terms of your what you're contributing to the city of Colwood relative to how much you should be the stipend or what the compensation should be. And it seems to me that most of you during the election campaign talked about your interest in contributing to the city of Colwood. So I think there's a bit of a balance there. If you have a full-time external position that you're being
30-second warning.
and you're salaried, perhaps compensation in that situation might be lower than it is. If you come to council, you're elected, you don't have a job, you don't have, there may be a balance there that can be, I don't know, but it may be something that's worth some consideration. The third point I wanted to make was simply to do with, I know all of you ran on fiscal responsibility and your interest in having
That's 2 minutes.
Colwood be a leader in terms of fiscal responsibility. And I think that in this case, I didn't see in the parameters that there's an opportunity to see Colwood lead the CRD communities as opposed to following what other CRD communities are doing, if it's limited to just the CRD. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Mr. Conrad, you're the one that gets 4 minutes?
4 minutes, yes.
Okay.
Your worship, council, staff. Before I start, I'd like to thank Marcy Lalonde for her help today. It was very much appreciated. You'll have to excuse my manners. I only have 4 minutes and I have 5 pages, so I'm just going to read as fast as I can. I wish to speak to Mr. Borhill's presentation on the ATMP and to a certain degree, the master transportation plan as a whole. In theory, I'm not opposed to what Mr. Borhill is proposing, yet I'm hoping council will move to defer acceptance of the plan until such time as the active transportation committee has been selected. To accept this framework before the committee has had a chance to give input tends to be counterproductive. As an observer of this process, I would like to add a few comments. Firstly, as a resident and in his position as a councillor, only Stuart Parkinson gave professional feedback to this plan. The balance of the respondents were from CRD Health Protection, BC Transit, Seacliff Properties, Walk Victoria, and the District of Metchosin. Even in his letter, Mr. Parkinson had to notify Walk Victoria to respond. I would think if the general public knew about this, at least a few residents would have responded in favor or been opposed to the plan. So with no public input, how can we say it is supported by Colwood residents? Secondly, how does this recommendation dovetail into the master transportation plan in relationship to roads and feeder streets with limited right-of-way? It would seem we are trying to set up a gold standard on roads that may not be able to accommodate them. As an example, on limited right-of-ways roads such as Metchosin and other feeder streets, perhaps there should be flexibility built into the design where sidewalks could be reduced to 1.5 meters or 1.75 meters in width with a 1 meter wide elevated bike lane and a 0.3 meter wide cement separation barrier. We really need to be more flexible in order to approach, especially with this proposed design, as we will be giving 67% of Metchosin right away to 5.5% of the people using it. We simply can't accept this. Thirdly, we are always about best practice. Yet we continue to install traffic lights at intersections that could accommodate roundabouts, which by the Ministry of Transportation's own guidelines, 7040.01 and 7040.02 state roundabouts should be considered as first option at any intersection. So what are we doing? We build a roundabout in an area that is environmentally sensitive. I'm sorry, how long?
That was 1 minute, sorry.
So what we are doing, we build a roundabout in an area that is environmentally sensitive, near a peat bog and next to a fish-bearing stream, which needs to be moved with a tremendous amount of rock needs to be blasted and hauled away. How much does this project going to cost? Where a roundabout should have been located is at Latoria and Metchosin Road in a relatively flat area with gravel base. But here we install lights. When Royal Bay was originally planned and I was pushing for an under overpass at Latoria and Machosen Road. Residents in the area were told a roundabout was going to be built. After the development started, I was told a roundabout couldn't be done at this location because it was at the bottom of the hill. According to the Ministry of Transportation, that information was totally false. Then I was told it didn't have balanced traffic flow. I confirmed there was some validity to this, but according to the ministry officials, again, a roundabout would still be better option for this site. Then I was told there wasn't enough room for 2-lane roundabout. This was partially correct, but additional room could have been achieved by building a retaining wall on the east side of Machosen Road, backfilling it to the wall to gain the needed space to simply reduce the double-lane roundabout to a single-lane roundabout to match Machosen Road.
That's 4 minutes.
Pardon me? That's it? Okay. I'll do it again later. Thank you.
You should ask for a delegation.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Conrad. Thank you. Any other speakers?
Carol Brown with Scenic Citizens Environment Network in Colwood. Citizens Environment Network in Colwood, Scenic, is aware that the council agenda this evening includes a discussion of council remuneration. We understand that a consultant will be presenting options for you to consider in arriving at a suitable remuneration accounting formula. The process outlined by the consultant, Joe McDonald, provides many varying aspects for consideration. Scenic wishes council to consider one further aspect in their deliberations. As Colwood is working hard to reduce greenhouse gases by encouraging active transportation and increased transit usage, we would like to ask council and the consultants to consider the remuneration package presented to include, as an addition, a BC transit bus ticket package per year. A 100 ticket package is valued at $225. Of course, this package could be reduced to an agreed upon number of tickets and could be used in part for municipal business as well as other transportation trips by councillors.
30-second warning.
By providing such a package to our councillors as part of their remuneration, we believe that we as a municipality are walking the talk, so to speak. And we may likely be the first BC municipality to make a tangible statement in this particular way to reduce municipal greenhouse gases by council and possibly at a later time by staff.
Two-minute
Colwood
warning.
making a statement would be making a statement to other employers that through remuneration avenues, it is possible to provide the means and the opportunity for clean transportation when employees and management consider it as a useful benefit option. Consider the climate implications if large unions such as BCGEU or QP were to offer monthly transit passes as part of their contract and remuneration packages. We could be taking a significant step towards a cleaner transportation movement. Scenic would also like to express support for the agenda item 11.2, the building bylaw amendment, energy conservation and greenhouse gas emission reduction. This is an important step forward for greenhouse gas reduction. Thank you for your consideration for Scenic recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Seeing no further speakers, we will move on. Notice of motion, just a reminder to council, there's no discussion on this. It'll just be Councillor Day who is making the notice of motion. I'll just have her read her motion. Whoops, I jumped delegations. Bad me. First of all, we'll have delegations. Laura Davis, President of Arts and Culture, Colwood Society. If I can ask you to come up, Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Laura Davis, President of Arts and Culture Colwood Society. I'm pleased tonight to share with you a short update of our progress and our plans for 2022-2023. Our mission as an organization, we're a not-for-profit society located in Colwood to provide advocacy, collaboration, strengthening our partnerships, connecting community with the arts, and delivering programming which aligns with our values. This is very important to our organization, our values, to create interest and engagement, to share, teach, and support mental health and the well-being of our community. We will deliver programs with integrity, respect, inclusion, and diversity. We strive to be successful, transparent, and accountable. Our programming is envisioned to include events that are beyond just the traditional visual arts. Our programs will showcase the arts in a way that provides community engagement and helps to enhance and sustain a healthy community here in Colwood. Shown here is a project we completed in the summer of 2021, the Emily Carr interpretive sign. It's on Painter Trail. And she painted the famous above gravel pit. So that was a Create Places grant. And this year we are in the final stages of creating a poetry station, which will engage the Royal-based secondary school young poets. What we plan to do is rotate presentations of the poems in a display case at the Pit House or the West Lagoon Park. And of course that was Create Places as well. After much planning in whoops, I think I skipped my page. No, I did. For the spring and summer, we hosted for Colwood Community the Bloom Show. It's an adjudicated art show, and it was hosted in the historic Pendray House. Also, we hosted the Summer Art Show, open to all artists in the Meadow Green Park along the swale. Each of these events had very favorable turnout. For the summer, we provided musical theater by Four Seasons Musical Theater Company at Meadow Park. We added aerial artists and a kids zone featuring artistic creations and kite making. It was fantastic with over 300 people attending over the weekend. We also have been providing or trying to provide visual arts classes, teaching watercolor. We did one in Emery Hall. We'd like to do more. In the late fall, we hosted the Gifts and Wishes Artisan Showcase with 24 of our artists in attendance from the Coast Collective. This was located at the Senior Center and was a perfect venue for this type and size of showcase. About 250 people attended that two-day event. We also came to the Christmas Light Up, brought a kids art zone, and we hosted one musical performance. After much planning in late fall, we turned our focus on to the Insight Festival. Our entire cost, hard cost for that was $9,000. We utilized $5,000 of the grant in aid funding we received from the City of Colwood for that festival. This was a partnership with Parks Canada, not a sponsorship, a partnership. And they provided a huge amount of in-kind contributions that helped us really be substantial to make the whole festival happen. So the festival was a result of a unique collaboration between arts and culture and Fort Rudd Hill, Fisgard Lighthouse, National Historic Sites, Parks Canada. As partners, we set on our path to create interconnections between arts, culture, nature, historical awareness, and building strong community bonds. Our desire for this festival is to connect and learn from the elders and artists also that participated about the land we're on. The event Insight Festival was inspired by the idea that looking out from the shore of Fort Rudd Hill, First Nations land that we can see, the surrounding mountains, the ocean, and our past, and the possibilities for a bright future are all in sight. For this last year, there were 2,000 in attendance. We felt that was a very successful event for a first year. We are well underway to bring the Insight Festival to life with grant funding applications to province and federal levels at this time. We anticipate growing the festival to include more musicians, artists, and Indigenous presence. Future programming. Looking to the future, we see the programming to pretty much what we offered in 2022. We are underway, though, with an additional classical concert series at St. John the Baptist Heritage Church. Our concerts will feature string quartets and trios. And I did have a conversation also with Georgia Desjardins of Seacliff Properties, who is one of our title sponsors. And we talked about this type of concert being offered in some of the placement areas in the new development, the Seaside, one being the amphitheater. But please know, an amphitheater of greater size and function will certainly be welcomed by the arts. We plan to bring a small musical theater production to Colwood as well, pretty much the same as we did last year. For the visual arts, we envision plein air painting in our various parks, as well as an adjudicated bloom art show with our close collective members. We have applied for a BCAC project assistant grant for an artist in residence for 3 weeks, and in late fall to again offer the Coast Collective Gifts and Wishes Holiday Showcase, scheduled for November. Visual arts teaching is also on our mind. An area of interest we would like to start offering consistent beginner and intermediate classes. To be efficient also, and have presence locally, we are in great need for physical space of our own. In this physical space, we could host art shows, teach visual arts, as well as we would have an office for our organization. First Nations, the initiatives there are really important to us as an arts organization. We're already connecting very well with Esquimalt and Songhees, but we want to collaborate a lot more with them to identify their needs and interests. And we've been able to do some of that through this Insight Festival. We want to support them, not only just get to know them, but support them artistically as well to further, they have lots of artists and we're excited about that. So here's an area that's kind of dear to me. Is funding. This is an example of our already diversified arts funding. This reflects total revenue base of 19,000 for the preceding 9 months of our fiscal year. It all began with the city's initial support. It is wonderful to note that the donations we received are almost matched by the city's funding. These are all actual dollars that you're looking at here. And this does not reflect the huge and substantial in-kind contributions we've received. Arts and culture funding models are unique. Much diversity is required to be sustainable. In the coming year, we're hoping to leverage on top of municipal funding, provincial and federal funds, and continue to do so. Last year, we were successful with the community gaming grant. This year, we've applied, as I've mentioned before, for several new grants. One of which is the Canada Summer Jobs, the British Columbia Arts Council Project Grant, and we're in process of working on the Heritage Canada Festivals Grant. And we will again submit for community gaming. It is important to note that many of these revenue streams rely on some municipal support. We thank also the private donors and corporations that sponsored us. Cablecraft, Black Press Media, Wishar News, the Storage Room helped us to kind of get through our first 2 years here. Volunteers is a big thing. Currently, we are an all volunteer organization as of today. Our volunteer base has increased substantially this year to allow us to deliver many more events. We have documented 1,000 hours in 7 months for 7 volunteers. That does not include all of the other volunteer hours for the many people who participate on an event by event basis. We don't measure that as well as we should be. Then, yes, we are fortunate to have several directors with management skill set, not for profit governance, teaching, finance, artistic accreditation, project management, infrastructure planning, procurement, and marketing. And you can go to our website and read more about our team. It is with passion that our team gathers together to plan, create, and deliver arts and culture to the city of Colwood. We strive to make impact that will engage and inspire the citizens of Colwood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. I know that you and the many volunteers involved with Arts and Culture Colwood put in a significant amount of time, and it certainly is noticed. I'm going to be a little long-winded here, so I ask you to bear with me, but arts and culture, you know, are threads, I think, that form a pretty integral part of the fabric of a healthy community. As a speaker mentioned earlier, in addition to sports facilities and other things, arts and culture is important to our children, to adults, to seniors, to all ages. And you know, myself, I walk by the Emily Carr sign every day, so I see that work. And then I attended the Insight Festival, and it's with that in mind that I wanted the floor first here, because I understand that despite the hard work that you've done on fundraising, the donations that you receive, the grants that you receive, there is a challenge. There's a misalignment with Heritage Canada this year that I think potentially imperils the ability to hold this wonderful event. And I say wonderful because one of the stated goals in our OCP is around the Colwood waterfront, and the Colwood waterfront is more than just the hot button topics that we'll hear later. It includes Fort Rod Hill and Fisgard Lighthouse, and it's an area that we want to showcase. The Insight Festival, you know, has momentum, and I don't want to derail that. So from what I understand, Heritage Canada has requested a commitment from the city of Colwood to match what we've done last year, which is not significant. It's 5,000 in grant and 2,000 in kind, if I'm not mistaken. But because of the regulatory shift on the federal side, they're wanting that commitment prior to the grant and aid being potentially awarded by the city. So I would like to propose a motion to confirm to Arts and Culture Colwood that we will provide $5,000 in funding and 2,000 in grant and aid.
That will-
2,000 in kind.
That will come up at 8.1.
Sorry?
You're getting ahead of yourself. 8.1 under new business, under correspondence requiring direction.
I see no reason why we can't.
Well, we can do it now if you want. Go ahead. Yep.
Well, I believe everyone's had a chance to review it. If not, I'm happy to delay, but I believe that there's an opportunity to fund it now with the caveat, if need be, from council that should you, Arts and Culture Colwood, come before council and receive a grant and aid of anything up to $5,000, that we would then supplant that with the monies that have been paid out of other funds earlier. So we're not in effect double dipping. We would just be providing the assurance that we can go forward and continue with really what is a fantastic event and keep that momentum. So that's my motion.
Councillor Jantzen.
Yeah, thank you. Do we want to formalize that and just adjust the agenda to bring 8.1 forward, Your Worship?
Absolutely. Yep, over here.
I'm happy to move that.
We got to move it. You want to second it then?
I see Councillor Day has seconded.
Okay, Councillor Day seconded. Okay.
Discussion?
Yes, discussion.
Thank
please.
you,
Go ahead.
Your Worship, and thank you for the oratory, Councillor Ward. And I think it's a worthy endeavor, and I wholeheartedly second your motion. I take it you're moving that. I'm happy to second that.
Got Councillor Day.
Thank you, Your Worship, as long as someone does.
Okay. Councillor Day, you want to do some more motivation?
No, I'm good. I just wanted to express my personal thanks for the Colwood Arts Society for doing the phenomenal work that they've done in getting this grassroots Colwood organization going and keeping going in spite of many, many challenges. So thank you.
I just want to echo the same sentiment. I believe, the vision, I think Langford wants to be this sports capital of British Columbia. And I certainly like to be the arts and culture capital of British Columbia. It suits our community. That's how I see it anyways. That's someone asked me that vision, and that's what I see happening here. So, and it is such a pleasure to see an organization stand up, and get up on its own. And I've watched this in a very short time frame. We've always my understanding of the grant and aid was, you do it for a couple of years until the people get up and going, and you try to help out, and you certainly are living up to that reputation. I mean, now we're only 1/3 of your funding now, which is absolutely phenomenal. Kudos to Laura and your entire team. Just phenomenal work. So proud of you, and I'm so proud to be associated with it. So this is what I call community, and you are the example. You exemplify everything that I think of what a community should be. So I am so personally proud of each and every member of your team. Thank you very much. At that time, I am going to call the question. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. Well done. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now we go back to Councillor Day, notice of motion. Councillor Day.
The motion that I'm proposing is as written on the agenda, that staff return to council with options to provide minute-taking support to the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues meetings.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Okay, so we did 8.1. We'll jump to item 9, unfinished business. I'll have Mr. Earl introduce it. It's the policing facilities project update. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the January 9th meeting, when council last considered this issue, Superintendent Preston was not able to be in attendance to answer some of the questions. He's in the gallery now and will be pleased to answer further questions that council had on this topic.
Thank you very much. So I guess I should just preempt this. We did meet with Colliers and they answered a bunch of questions from a Collier's perspective. There were some questions that were asked that were more apropos to you, Superintendent. So at this point in time, I'll open the floor for questions for the Superintendent Preston. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So one of the questions around the table was really, how did we get to where we are now? We are understanding that Class D estimates of kind of a ballpark figure, what it would cost to update the Wishar RCMP building where it is today. And also compared that with what it might cost to build a new station somewhere else. The difference was fairly small comparatively, given that it was a very rough Class D estimate, and we were wondering why there's no RFP that's gone out, just Colliers was selected. And just wondering, how did we get to, it's a long time coming and we seem to have waited a long time and then been moving fairly quickly. We're just trying to understand, or at least I'm trying to understand how we got to that spot.
Okay, I'm not sure that I'll be able to definitively answer your question. The building itself is a municipal asset. And so, 3.5, 4 years ago, I brought it to the attention of then the CAOs at the time, as well as the mayors, that the existing building was soon becoming antiquated, and there wasn't a sufficient amount of space given the rapid growth of the detachment area. The fact that we're one of the fastest growing communities in the country, including police forces or police detachments. So during that time, the Colwood, how Colliers became involved, I think you probably have to speak to the CAOs. I know that they had previous experience. They were looking for someone to had previous experience dealing with police buildings to have a very preliminary look at options and costing. I don't think it was a large sum of money that was paid out, but again, these are municipal items. They're not an RCMP item. It doesn't come out of my line objects or my budget. So I'll stop there. Are you satisfied with that portion of the answer?
Okay. I'm sorry, my iPad is really not cooperating today. I had all my notes on it and now it won't open my report. So I'm going to leave off at this point and let others ask questions because all my notes are not coming.
No problem. You mentioned about the location of the building, and I'm happy to speak to the location because that's obviously an important one. So the spirit behind the current location, which, you know, it has been sufficient for 50 years or I guess it hasn't been 50 years, but the building's 50 years old. We moved there since we moved from the Colwood police station over to that location quite a few years ago. Obviously, Langford, Colwood, View Royal, Machosen, Highlands, and Songhees and Esquimalt make up the detachment area. Probably 55% of those calls are in Langford. 20% would be in Colwood, with probably 15 to 18% in View Royal. Of course, we then service the Malahat all the way to the top of the Malahat out to the Highlands and as well into Machosen. So finding something that's centrally located, but the key piece is access to highways and being able to have that egress onto those highways, proper egress. And so the location so far has been very suitable in the fact that we can get onto the number 1 highway very quickly to get out to View Royal, to Esquimalt, Songhees, to the Highlands, to the Malahat. We can also go down Atkins Ave and get to the Colwood area. We can go down Souk Road, we can go down Goldstream, and we can be in Colwood very quickly, as well as obviously View Royal. So the location has not been an issue. What we did look at it with the RCMP, and they looked at that, our experts within Green Timbers and Surrey, is, you know, what is the main thing? And obviously access to highways is the main thing, so we can respond similar to a fire department where, you know, but I guess it's a guessing game as to where those calls are coming in for service every day. And our members aren't, unlike the fire department, our members are out and about in the community. Many of them are. That's your day-to-day frontline uniform officers. They're on the road. So they're in Colwood, they're in View Royal, they're in, you know, all these different communities that we serve. At any given time, there's likely a police officer in a car in your area. We did ask that essentially when we look top down, what would be sufficient? Colwood Fire Hall to the current detachment, a radius in that area would probably be the ideal optimal location for a detachment. They couldn't find, Colliers couldn't find any suitable land that would be, you know, I think obviously affordable. There was the one Dodge dealership where the current Dodge dealership is now. And I believe that land sold for $25 million is what I was told by the city of Langford. The current building is owned by Langford, Colwood, and View Royal. It's jointly owned by those 3 municipalities. The province rents from you. Machosen will have to rent from you as well here as they progressed over 5,000. So I'm going to stop there because I've been talking, and perhaps a follow up.
Sure. I just have one. I was actually on council when we built the 1999 edition. Yeah. So I do remember it well. It was rather quickly. You know, we tried to build extra space in the 3rd floor, notorious 3rd floor was built to try to have foresight for the future, and was very quickly overtaken by a new RCMP program at the time, which was, I believe it's called Prime, and the identification software Canada-wide, which required man hours and office space and took up a lot of that area. So I guess my question that I remember from my notes that I can't get to open right now was, is there anything new coming that you're maybe already seeing on the horizon that would be a program like Prime was, where you're starting something new in the RCMP that may require additional space allocation?
Yeah, so thankfully that the council did have the foresight, because when I moved into that building, when I came to that building in 2014, other than my office, my current office, and Crest, which rents some space out, a very small amount of space up there right now, and they're going to be moving out here at some point. That whole floor was empty. So we were able to actually move in. Otherwise, we would be in ATCO trailers in the parking lot right now. So we're very fortunate for that. As far as what's coming down in the future, yes, there is lots of things. In a growing detachment, you're going to see new sections. For instance, we have a special victims unit which deals with sex assaults. We just started that up last year. We're looking at, provided we get the adequate resources, a mental health team that's going to be started up this year. We have an explosion of child porn files that have inundated us over the last number of years. With that comes, you need specialized investigators and subject matter experts to download, and that takes a lot of space. And to have certain areas, what they call, to simplify it, it's an area where you can't destroy the data remotely. So you're able to seal off rooms so that individuals, when we secure their phones and their computers, they can't remotely log in and clear and wipe out that data. Those types of spaces, these are all things that the RCMP is aware of. We know them. And that's why we deal with our space analysis people in Green Timbers, who have been all part of this process over the last 3.5 years. And they have said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Exhibit handling has, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we weren't worried about fentanyl. Now we have these huge ventilation things so that members don't die when they open up a package, an unknown substance, and they're weighing it, or if it's fentanyl. We didn't need that, but now you need a space that's, an 8x8 area with proper ventilation. There's copious amounts of, units and specialized sections that you can anticipate with a growing community like that. All you really need to do is look at places like Burnaby, Surrey, Richmond, Langley, Coquitlam, all those detachments. We're heading in that direction. We're no longer a small police force here. We're becoming a big city police force. And with that, you're going to have all those, and you're going to need those spaces. And that's why we rely on the specialties of the people that have already done this. It's kind of like TripAdvisor. We don't need to reinvent this. Let's just go and see what other people's experiences were. And we have the advantage of looking at places like Kelowna. They've recently built a building here, 5 years ago. What were the successes? What were the failures from that? Duncan is currently building a $50 million building, which is about probably half the size that we're looking at, the proposed building here. We'll be able to learn from them. They're already at lockup stage, and they'll be moving in here probably the next 6 months, I anticipate.
Okay, thank you. I will yield to other questions in the interest of time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordison.
Okay, Superintendent Preston, I guess I understand how frustrating this must be for you. Like, you probably just want to get on with it and get this built. But I guess I'm not sure I have actual questions, but maybe I just want to express my frustrations. Basically, I don't want to keep beating home about this, but the option of obtaining colliers to do this work, it wasn't, I'm just concerned that it wasn't done in an open, transparent, fair, and accountable process. And it wasn't done through a proper competitive bid process. I'm not saying colliers isn't the right people to do the job, but I'm just saying we don't know what we don't know. And that comes at a cost for our residents. And so that's one concern. I guess it's colliers and yourself, the CAOs that were part of this committee. It's kind of your job to show us that this is the best option. And I'm not sure that I've seen that information. We don't even have the minutes from the meetings that occurred. So I just feel like there's missing information still. And I hear that you're outgrowing the space but I don't see a professional condition assessment of the building that's been done that deems it end of life, or that there's been other options looked at. And I don't understand why those 3 particular sites were identified when there's so many others. And I honestly believe that there are others. There's many developers in the city that own property that could work better. Perhaps. I mean, it's just things we haven't looked at.
Do you have like a specific question as to why isn't this site being considered, or is there, or in terms of the RFP or call it their Collier's process, I have complete faith in Collier's, whether or not, the process for hiring them, again, that's not an RCMP. It's not an RCMP building. So, I mean, I have they've done previous work for detachments, and I know that, the other detachments were happy with the limited. This is very, very, very preliminary work that they've done, obviously. And we're within probably $20 million either side of what they projected as the cost. So I think, to be fair to your taxpayers and constituents and the council, you need to get it to a stage where you can make an informed decision, exactly what you're talking about, but without advancing it, which at that point would actually go out to tender, from my understanding. So I think that you're, don't know if you fully understand, and I say that respectfully, of course, where we're at in the process. Like we're very, at the very, very kind of preliminary stages of looking at costing and what would work.
But we asked that question of Collier's, and the validation stage, to my understanding, is to design for that specific site. So if that's not the right site, then why would we put that money forward?
With the site is in conjunction with Collier's, the RCMP, and myself, as to what, professionally, like, I've been doing this for 25 years. I have some idea of what an ideal site would be. Collier's has been doing this quite a bit as well. The RCMP and Green Timbers, they have looked at this as well. They feel this is a very good site. If somebody had come and said, or it can come right now, and say, here is a site, like, it's not like it's a small, you need 4 acres of land or whatever, 3 acres of land. Do you know of 3 acres of land that is vacant in an area here? Because they went out and looked for that land and they couldn't find it. So if you're saying it's available in that bubble area, you're right, now would be the time to speak up.
Yeah, it would be. There is lots of land. I don't know what's available. But I don't believe that all those options have come to the table. And I can think of a couple off the top of my head that I think could work and would be better suited. And I'm not here trying to get the RCMP detachment to move to Colwood. That's not my objective. I just think that, this is honestly, if to say, I feel that this plan has already been decided and approval for the next phase is what is wanted. And I think everybody has to stop and pause and realize that an election has occurred. And during this process, as part of my responsibility, is to ensure the best way forward for our taxpayers. It's also the correct way forward when thinking about the city's future. I don't personally see any pending doom on this project if we are just to pause and get more information so that other options or other areas could be explored, and to make sure that we've done our due diligence and that is the best location. The current location is the best location. I really feel you're outgrowing that spot. And you're just going to get crowded in there more with all the 12-story buildings that City of Langford has proposed. I don't feel as if it's as accessible as it could be. And I just think that we need to, look at that. This is a significant cost for our taxpayers. And I don't think that should be taken lightly. And so I would actually like to make a motion, and I don't know if other people would like to talk first or.
If we could, can I just let? people
Yeah,
discuss?
certainly.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Torres. Councillor Jantzen.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a lot to chew on here. I take some of Councillor Jordison's points. This did migrate from the last council to this current council, so unfortunately, this table's left kind of piecing this together. I get that. Unfortunately, how we got to Colliers, you know, honestly, I can't even speak to that. That happened at a different level, but I am comfortable that the chief administrators in the Western communities here were involved in that process along with their mayors. So I have faith that the oversight that was there certainly was in favor of protecting the community or serving the community's interests. I don't believe there's any malfeasance, and I hesitate to go down that road. Now, was it done as a standard RFP? I mean, I don't know. It never came to the table for discussion, so I really didn't get any input in that. But where are we at today? Where we're at is we're with, we heard from Colliers. Quite frankly, I was extremely impressed with the Colliers presentation. I thought it was on point. I thought it answered any questions I might have. Clearly, a very deep dive was done into this process. And to Councillor Jordison's point, she clearly specified that if there was an alternative location that came forward that was identified, they could quickly toss that into the mix as well and churn something out, some kind of analysis, because the baseline work has been done. So if we're talking about expenditures or serving the interests of the community, I believe to take this back to the RFP stage and do it all over again, that's where we're going to start doing, you know, not doing it justice, in the sense that then we're going to, again, presumably throw out what Colliers has already done and then pay them to do it over again, or someone like them down the road. That doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's time for us to be forward looking, not rearward looking. If a suitable location that all these people didn't think of, and perhaps someone at the table has some insights, perfect. Let's bring it forward. Let's put it to bed or analyze it and toss that into the mix. Now about the detachment, I mean, you stated, Superintendent, that you're satisfied with that location. Is there anything that would change that perspective on your part? Like with the future development, you probably have a better idea of what's going on in Langford than this table does. Do you see some impending pressures that might change your mind at any point in the next, say, 40 years or the life cycle of that building?
No, as far as proposed locations, and you know, we relied on the experts, not these are the experts. This is what they do for a living. They came back and said, this is the best location based on what is out there. Yes, if there was a flat 5-acre, 10-acre piece of land in that area, that bubble area that we agreed on as professionals, as the RCMP, the detachment commander, and Colliers, based on their experience, my experience, and the RCMP's experience, yeah, we would have looked at another location. There was no other location. So what we've got now is you've got 3.5 years of work, and we've got, you know, a proposal to halt that, to go back to square one, where we've got a detachment right now that is busting at the seams. Public safety is crucial and paramount. We want to be able to provide, expand, and give the services that your constituents need. We can't do that if we don't have proper interview rooms, proper spacing for special victims units, for sex assaults, for child porn, for drug investigations. If we don't have that space, we can't provide that service. And we are at capacity right now. And we told mayor and council, we told the mayor and CAO 3.5 years ago that we would be out of space within 3 to 5 years. And we are there now, and it's about 4 years. It's going to come in on 4 years. So to go back based on there may be another location, if there's some professional or somebody that can come to the table and says, here's another, I'll be happy to look at it. I'm sure the RCMP would be happy to look at it. But all I'm hearing so far is that there may be another location. They looked at the maybes. These are the professionals that you paid for and hired. They didn't find that location. If there is, now would be the time to speak up and say, this is the location. Otherwise, you're arguably putting public safety at risk, because we're not going to be able to provide services.
So
those are my points.
Thank you, Superintendent. So what I've heard through all that is you're satisfied with that location. And from my understanding of the history of it all, that it was chosen as sort of a geographical center of the West Shore at the time. And it does make some sense to be located near the highways.
I mean, ideally, the Dodge dealership, which actually shares Colwood and Langford, would be great. That would have been a fantastic location. If I could bunk my friend out at the Colwood Fire Hall, I would probably even entertain going as far as that one, but I don't think Chief Irwin would think too kindly of that. But, you know, all joking aside, the location right now has great access to the #1 highway. And you have to keep in mind that we service 7 communities, and there's a lot of efficiencies and a lot of benefits that, which I'm sure we'll speak to at a later date. But when we look at 55% of the calls are in Langford right now, and we can be in Colwood in minutes, and we are in Colwood all the time. It is the ideal location at this time.
Thank you. And further to your point, I do believe that this region is well served by your detachment, and I applaud all the work that you and your membership does. But this joint model, I mean, in essence, we have the regional police service in the region here, because we can say it's a conglomeration of multiple communities that brings to bear multiple different enforcement units all at one location. And I think that this community is well served by that cohabitation, co-location of all those units. I mean, and we enjoy the benefit of having them on site. So I'll yield as well, Your Worship, and let some of my peers speak. Thank you.
Councillor Day? She's got in.
Ian is still, he's a first-time speaker.
Oh, sure. You're gonna have to plug yourself in. Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Day. You know, first, I think I'd give credit to Councillor Jordison and Councillor Day for being a conscience for taxpayers. I think they led the charge at the initial meeting that we had to seek additional information from Colliers and from yourself, Superintendent Preston. And I did have some concerns, and primarily because of, well, we call it perception or reality. One need only watch historic videos. The transparency in Langford haven't always been perceived as walking hand in hand when it comes to development and council process. So my concerns largely revolved around the fact that the only communication to date, you know, had been through the 3 mayors, 3 now deposed mayors. There wasn't a lot of information that filtered its way down to council, if you will. So, you know, that led me to, you know, to suspect that you know, that there could be some flaws in the process, or that the outcome was predetermined before the council or the Colliers was engaged. However, you know, having heard from Colliers, I too, you know, I'd have to agree with Councillor Jantzen that they, you know, I wouldn't question their integrity. I believe that they were tasked with, you know, with delivering what they do, you know, what they're charged to do. They delivered a pretty solid report. And, you know, my only question I think that remains for me is around the requirements that they were given that did limit the site selection. And my question for you, I guess, Superintendent Preston, was around the parking. Surface parking requirements were what really dictated the additional land base, almost 50% of the land. We learned through the report from Colliers that about 113 spots were required for police vehicles, you know, guests, jail guards and cleaning staff and such. And then the remaining, 180 some odd were, I'm guessing, you know, staff parking essentially. And I wonder, drawing on the 2020 court decision in Victoria and Whistler, where it was determined that scramble parking wasn't in fact something that the RCMP were entitled to, or members weren't entitled to. You know, do you feel there's any way to contract the surface parking, or is there a contractual obligation to provide that amount of parking to members at this point?
No, there is nothing contractual that says you need to provide, you know, parking for employees. However, you know, I would caution that in a time right now where people have options in terms of where they want to live and work, being that this is one of the most expensive places, arguably in the world, certainly in the country, to live, you know, we have a lot of members that work in, a lot of the local members, they ride their bikes and they walk if they can, if they live in the close proximity. But we have a lot that live in Cobble Hill and Souk and some of the more distant areas because they can't afford to live here, like a lot of other people probably, you know, and their kids and everybody else. So to say, we're not going to give you a place to park, too bad, so sad. We'll get you a bus pass, but you work shift work and you're done at 5 in the morning and you work 12 hours. I would caution you that you're probably going to have significant issues finding members that want to come and work at West Shore Detachment when they have 700 other detachments and units to go choose from across the country. So I'm not saying that we can't do other things, by no means. Is there, and I think that's part of the key of keeping this detachment local, right across from the trail, where members and staff can, you know, commute using green methods, and they do. There's lots that do. You know, putting it out in, you know, as much as I'd love to have an ocean view in Royal Bay looking into the inner harbor. You're only going to disadvantage more and more members that want to commute using bicycles to try to get down into that location. We've actually been able to come up with a fantastic solution. You know, is it a long term? Who knows with what's going on with the railway? But they have leased us that for very, very cheap parking all the way along there for our staff. So at a very limited cost to taxpayers, we're able to have those members that are working shift work, and you know, not all of them work shift work, but well over half do, that they have actual parking. Does that answer some of your question?
No, it absolutely does. I think I just wanted to hear it from you, and I think you know, as any leader does, you've got to make the case for your team. So I appreciate it. And for me, I'd be clear. I think at this point, you know, we can debate back and forth the process, but I also, as I said at the initial meeting, and perhaps I was a bit presumptuous in it, that I've seen also time and again in this region that there is a cost with these capital projects, as we know, but there's also a cost in delaying them significantly. And at this stage, I feel at least my questions could be, you know, pushed into the next phase. So as far as I'm concerned, I think at this date, the work has been done, and I'm prepared to stand by the motion to move to the next phase.
Thanks very much, Councillor.
Councillor Gay.
Thank you. Finally got my iPad working. It's been challenging me today. So I just wanted to ask, one of the options in the report that we have before us is to consider the costs, the benefits, and the challenges associated with a multi-building approach to police service delivery. Do you have any thing that you would like to share with us about potentially looking at either a more distributed type system where you had some facilities in one area and some in another, or with sharing space? One of the things that Colwood knows is on the horizon is future need for another fire hall in some areas, and there are sites both in the Allendale district that could be considered, was definitely looked at previously. But there's also Wishar Parks and Rec, which I don't have all the information on yet, but there are lands there that could provide options. Both of those locations would be easy access for transit and highways, both. So whether you at some point in the future need to look at different parking arrangements due to your own space needs, or if there's other considerations, those both would offer opportunities to meet future needs that we may not even have foreseen.
Yeah, I think again, that current locator, the location at the one if you could rec, I think that you're outside of kind of the envelope of where the majority of calls for service come in. So you're going to be, you know, certainly losing some efficiency, and it's probably going to cost you more money as a result of that in terms of staffing, because you're going to need more officers because of travel time. and people coming to the detachment as well. It's just that location I wouldn't say is ideal, and nor did Colwood's and nor did RCMP when they looked at it. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Just whether or not the distributed idea would.
Oh, the
would work.
multi, I mean, I couldn't think of personally knowing what goes into these buildings. I couldn't think of anything less efficient than having two buildings. The fact that you're going to have the security, the staffing to keep the doors open. I don't think people understand how much security goes into these buildings. We're holding people's very, very personal records, and for good reason. We have adequate security. So if you're looking at having a second location, you're looking at, are you looking at another cell block? You're looking at another front counter where now all of a sudden you've got more front counter staff, janitorial staff, your cost of upkeep. I know that in speaking with the CAOs, they all looked at that originally and said that that would be grossly inefficient, as did Collier's. And I think, did Collier's not mention that during their meeting?
Not that I recall, but I wasn't thinking in terms of, cell blocks in both locations. I was thinking more in terms of some of the units that you mentioned might be better served separate from the other, the victims units, the, different types of operations where you're looking at internet issues and maybe even your evidence in a separate building with separate protocols.
Why would you think that would be more efficient, Councillor?
Because you have the ability to have your staff who are responding to your calls, and then your separate location for your other departments that are working collaboratively.
Again, respectfully, because this is my world, and I'm probably foreign in your world, but to have a cell block, or sorry, to have exhibits in a separate building, you'd have to then staff that 24 hours a day to secure that. And then when a member needs those exhibits, they would have to drive down, pick those exhibits up to process them, or to take them to court, or to send them off for analysis, or to receive them back. Again, I think that would be, really, 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 we can respectfully, grossly inefficient. And I've never heard of any other detachment or community doing that. Questions are all good, right? This is how we learn, but no, I wouldn't suggest that that's in any way efficient.
Well, there are arguments out there we don't need to discuss it greatly, but there are arguments for redundancy for post-disaster response, that we're not all on the same road or relying on the same services. But it's just unfortunate that we're at this point being asked to pony up the money to move forward with a plan that we weren't consulted on. So it's where we are. I'm sure that we will have effective and efficient policing wherever you may be. But I, in a perfect world, I would have liked to have understood the steps as we made them, rather than being asked to endorse something rather blindly after the fact. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jordison.
I just wanted to say that I guess it's been said that the last council knew about the project. And I'd like to disagree with that, because the last council knew about the project cost, and that's all they knew. They didn't know the specifics of it. So I think that's unfortunate. And it's the same with us. We don't know the specifics either. I think and everybody says there's been little cost made so far in what we've done in the 3 years or whatever, but we don't know what cost has been paid. We don't know. We don't have that information. And in regards to the location, I think that the request for surface parking, that is definitely limits locations. And I don't know if it's necessary to have surface parking. I think if it was a emergency police detachment type thing that you would want underground parking. I think it would be more secure. I guess we don't know where that middle ground is between all the municipalities anymore. We don't, it's, everybody is growing so much and we don't really know where that middle spot is to show where the police department should be. But it's not a hill I'm gonna die on. I mean, I just,
I think again, though, this is where you're right. You don't know, and you know, and not again, not being disrespectful at all. That's why you paid a consultant to tell you this is the best location. This is why the RCMP in Vancouver and Surrey looked at this and said, yes, this is an idea. And this is why you asked myself for my opinion based on my 25 years experience, would this be suitable in terms of parking? If you look at, there's a Viking project just down the street from us on the corner by the Reflections building, and they've gone underground, and portion of the current rendering is actually underground parking to your point. And I agree that there may be a need to go underground if all of a sudden we don't have adequate parking. There is a water table there that would restrict you to one floor. Viking Properties is currently doing that with it. Doesn't appear to have any issues. And you also have the opportunity, from what I'm told, to do stacked parking in the back as well. So the parking, because they've been able to obtain 3 out of the 4 properties necessary for what they believe, Colliers believe, is adequate parking. If you needed more parking, you have the ability to stack parking in the back or to go underground for 1 floor. And again, you're 100% right that this would have been great information that could have been shared along the way. And I'm not disputing that the last council was not aware of, or was aware, sorry, of a lot of this, because they weren't.
and I guess I just want to say that the reason the Wishart Parks and Rec sounded like a good solution is because that land is already owned by the municipalities, that with the detachment, the same kind of owners, you know, and also, you know, if the bridges ever go down and there's ever a big emergency, I understand space is supposed to be or is designated to be at the Wishart Parks and Rec and close to D&D and the waterway at the back there. So that place was thought out many years ago to be an emergency location. So
The current location actually at Wishar, the policing branch in Victoria, I sign a document every year that says that is actually the location that they will run police services if a natural disaster happens. And in the renderings that they've delivered so far, there is an EOC that is actually built in a multi-use space that is actually designed in the building that they're proposing for exactly what you're talking about. We already have the backup generators. We have all the emergency services in one location for all the communities. And like Councillor Jantzen said, this is kind of the regional police force for the whole Wishar. It is the regional police force for the Wishar. And so to have it all housed in there in a up-to-date earthquake, proof building, it makes sense to me that we'd be able to run the cities, the emergency departments out of the police department. You'd be able to, they have an area there which is used for the EOC / cafeteria / whatever else they've got in there. You'd be able to have all 3 or 4 communities working out of the police station with backup generator out of that new building. And it'd be modern, up to date with all the newest technologies.
I guess I just wanted to be on record that I honestly think that the cost overruns on this project, keeping it at the current site and revamping that, taking down that building, and there's gonna be huge cost overruns. And I honestly think building new and building somewhere else is the better way to go.
Do you know something that they don't? You know, when you say that you're confident or you believe that there's going to be these overruns, what do you base that on?
Just common sense. Like I work with BHA and we build hospitals and we do this all the time. And there's huge costs associated with a 1960s building coming down. And
I think they have that factored into their plan, and I don't want to insult Colliers by saying common sense, because Colliers has said that that's part of their plan, so, suggesting common sense would mean that Colliers doesn't have common sense, so I don't want to insult them. They've looked at the cost of taking down the old building and what it would cost.
Yeah, and also, I guess, just before I conclude, I guess I just want to say that parking is not a necessity for somebody to come to work. Giving them parking is, but taxpayers paying for it, that's just not on. Like doctors and nurses don't get their parking paid for. It's it's a nicety. It's not something that is a requirement. I can understand having parking built for them and whatnot, but somebody has to pay for it. So I think that's I don't think that's a proper way to look at things. People are going to come to work in Victoria because that's what everybody, RCMP, there's many awful places that you have to work throughout your career, and coming to Victoria is actually a bonus. And so I don't think that staff retention is a big concern over parking. But and you know what, at the end of the day, Superintendent Preston, I'm not against the police having what they need. That's not what this is about. I just don't think that we've had the proper background. We haven't had the proper discussions about this before we're having to make a decision to spend this kind of money. Maybe we could be spending the money on seeing whether that the Wishart Parks and Recreation is the right place to put a building, instead of proceeding with.
We did, with respect, we did look at those locations, so.
That wasn't one of the identified locations.
You're right, because it fell outside the area that we deemed would be best suited. So.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Jantzen.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship, and I'll be very brief. There's been a lot of talk here. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't come to you and ask where and how we should build a new city hall, which presumably we're going to need in the next decade. And I think that by me offering my 2 cents on where and how you build your detachment, I mean, I just don't see that in the cards for me. But talk to me about the parking, because you made a comment there. I mean, we've beaten up the parking a little bit here, but I'm gonna suggest that or ask you, I mean, is this a zero-sum proposition with regard to the parking? Like, is it the parking or forget the whole thing? Or is there a way to split the difference and find some accommodation in the middle there, in your opinion?
I think they already have. That's already been addressed by the CAOs and Colliers. They've already looked at the parking, and they have 100 spots down the side on the gravel parking lot there. Which,
so, as we move forward, and we're going to ask for more detailed description, I guess, a question for staff, Your Worship, just is there an opportunity in the next phase here to flush out some different ideas or pictures or what have you with regard to a variety of parking options? I wonder if we can ask staff that, Your Worship.
Sure, I think we can. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council is aware, Colwood is one of the 3 partners in this project. I'm confident that any questions or suggestions that Colwood had to the collective on how the next phase, should the project proceed, rolls out, would be warmly received by a joint group. But ultimately, that collective would meet to make such decisions.
So do you see a need for some kind of motion in this regard to bring back a variety of options with different footprints for parking, or can you just take that forward on our behalf?
I can assure you that.
Can I interrupt here? Sorry about that. I think we're losing track here a little bit. I certainly wasn't hoping that we're going to be deep diving about parking. It's not the hill that I want to fight the battle on right now. I don't think.
So I would agree with that. I'm trying to seek some consensus on the table, Your Worship, and move us forward with some of the concerns expressed by council people at this table. So that's all I'm looking for.
Okay, I understand where you're going with it, but we're the way I look at this right now. We're it's like it's a project, right? And And what they started off is they've got a concept. And then the measurements they came out with, they said, this is what we were asked to deliver, and that's what they delivered. And so they stayed within scope. So the way I looked at it, yes, there were questions. For the most part, the questions were answered. I can't second guess, the way I feel about this is that, I could say that, previous council, there were decisions that were made by previous councils before us, going back 20 years. And, Ellendale Pit, for example, the frontage work, for example, right? We were never a part of that, and we certainly didn't argue about it for a long time, right? I mean, it is what it is. And you just have to, sometimes you have to take things that, how I look at it is face value. There were very smart people involved in this process. We have 3 CAOs, 3 mayors, regardless of if they're in or out right now. They're smart people. I mean, there was reasoning, there was logic behind this. And so I didn't really want to second guess this, to tell you the truth. Honest, bona fide questions about location, because I thought that was a bit hazy still. So they were really good questions, and I enjoyed those questions, and I thought they're really good. Yeah, naturally, common sense tells me the same thing. You generally building new rather than knocking something over and rebuilding is generally, it's cheaper, but talking with the CAO about this, and he says that's what they thought going in, and to be told something totally different. No, it's not. I mean, in this case, so you have to read the situation, and I looked at it, and Collier's is a reputable company, and it was conceptual. And I understand this. What we're trying to get to is that next step, the preliminary. And I think that's what the question is right now. And I mean, it took me a little time. I had to kick myself a couple of times here, because the first thing that I wanted to do is just do the same thing, get down in the weeds, but we're not even there yet. So I think that's the comment I'd like to make right now. And I just think it would just, discussing parking right now and whether we're going to charge for it or not is really, we're talking about an $80 million project here. And we'll get to that later on. That's my feeling.
Thank you, Worship, for the clarity. I do appreciate the input, and it was meant to try and move things along, not obfuscate. So in conclusion, thank you so much for the opportunity, the 2 opportunities, but I wholeheartedly support moving this to the next stage and exploring it with some more detailed feedback coming our way to digest it future date. Thank you.
So you're moving the recommendation then, the entire recommendation? Okay, thank you. And do I have a seconder? No. Councillor Ward seconds it. Discussion. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to thank you, Mr. President, Sergeant Preston, for tonight and to help answer these difficult questions. The location thing bugs me a lot. Adding new onto old is always a bit of a challenge, whether it's a little shed on the side of your house or a big, huge building. You don't see it that often these days. And I'm a bit concerned that the 20-year looking forward thing will leave us in 20 years with another big decision, bigger than this one, twice the price, as the existing building that is being retained starts to meet its limits and perhaps growth. I'm hoping also that we go high enough this time so that in 20-25 years, you're moving into that second last floor that's still available, because in 30 years, you'll still need to expand, presumably. And I don't know at what point a city gets big enough to support a separate detachment. I guess that's a question I could ask you right now. Is there a rule?
Absolutely. These are great points that you make. And it generally is, obviously, I do construction. I know that building on is a nightmare normally, but I'm sure that Collier's explained that at $1,000 a square foot with 30,000 square feet, $30 million, it's not chump change, including the fact that the cell block is in there. The cell block is the most expensive piece of a building. So there is substantial value in retaining that 30,000 square feet. And I think that's where you're going to realize the savings that you're referring to. As far as building up, I know I spoke with the mayor of View Royal. He echoes exactly your comments. do it once, do it right. And I guarantee that there is a lot of multi-use that we would be able to rent out to in the long run. It is a very attractive location, a very attractive option for a lot of police and security, government agencies that would be able to cohabitate in that building with us. And then you'd be able to, similar to what we're doing, we did with Crest, what we did with our telecoms, and Councillor Day had mentioned primaries. I wasn't part of that, but they were obviously renting some space from the cities at one point 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So these are all extremely valuable points. You do have the option to go up.
Sure. And could you, do you have an answer for that question about the
Yeah,
size?
absolutely. Yeah.
Probably.
So when you look at some of the other, I would suggest that probably, in 30 years, you'll be able to probably, do a retrofit on the current building. But at that point, that's when I would be looking at a second location when you have much more density in the Colwood and View Royal area. Because at some point it becomes, you need to get to the other sides, and the traffic's going to be much more heavy. It's going to be much more efficient to have perhaps a second location. We are not there yet. And I've seen it with other locations that, and I've talked to other chiefs of police that have multiple buildings, including Vancouver, to be honest, and they would love to have it all into one. According to the deputy, when I talked to her, there is some other detachments that, again, they run into these areas where you lose efficiencies. When I talked to the province the other day, the director of policing, this is the most complex detachment in the province of British Columbia. It is, in my view, clearly the most efficient detachment in the province of British Columbia, because you've been able to, all play nice in the sandbox, integrate your resources. You don't need a dog all the time, but you need it sometimes, all that good stuff. So anyways, to get back to your question there, to keep focus, I love the idea that you've got the land that you talk about in Wanafuka there. And as densification happens in those areas, there may be in 25, 30 years, as long as you allocate some land and keep it aside for future planning, I think that would be a fantastic idea down the road.
Okay, I'd just like to then, I have faith in the validation process. I think that we're trying to get to here tonight, that the Joint Police Facility Steering Committee will guide us into this next step, which is, I'm looking forward to that. And I think the years past, I have deep concerns from what's been spoken about in the terms of the process and so on. I shouldn't say concerns, but I've looked at it and there's things I don't have the answer, but I do think it's time to move forward and move to this next validation stage or pursuit of the validation. And all because I think at the fundamental basis of it all, we want a safe, strong, well-policed community, and we've got that, and we want to maintain that and grow it. And so that's my position, is to support the motion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
So I just want to confirm something, Mr. Earl. This is going to be put out for tender, right? The validation phase, I believe, right?
Thank you, Your Worship. There'll likely be a series of tenders. Again, this will be collectively driven by the Joint Steering Committee. One municipality will likely take the administrative or financial lead. And so the procurement will be through one municipality. It's my expectation, given the size of these, that there'll be a public request for proposals for, first, an IDP advisor, second, an architect, third, a builder, fourth, a structural engineer, and there could be a fifth and sixth and seventh. The procurement methodology process that's recommended under IDP is one that fundamentally moves through the validation stage and asks that collective group to commit to that target budget. The go, no go at the end of validation is that group collectively committing to that budget, and moving forward from there, those contracts shift from fees for service to fixed contracts moving forward. And so, short answer, a series of public requests for proposals, likely governed by one municipality, guided by that regional joint steering committee.
Thank you very much. So, the one thing that I can tell you right now is that I personally would be committed to making sure that you're communicated to about this going forward. That's one thing for sure. And, you know, the other thing that's really important to me as we go along is public consultation on this, because it's such a big project. The more our public knows about it as we're going along, the better. You know, we don't have to go into a war. So these are two important principles that I will stand behind on this motion. And seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Oh, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you.
Thank you. New business, council remuneration. Mr. Earl, do you want to introduce our consultant?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have Joe McDonald here to walk council through a process that will ultimately allow her to go away and do some research and then come back with a more in-depth proposal on council compensation. So with that, I will ask Ms. McDonald to the microphone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Worship, councillors, staff. Thank you for inviting me here this evening. As CAO Earl has explained, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the principles, the targets, and establishing local government comparators to assist you in informing a compensation review. I trust you've had a chance to review the report that I submitted. So we'll have a few topics tonight. If we could have if there's a certain button I should be pushing. Okay, thank you. So the context, the guiding principles, the options to set the target, as well as some discussion, final comments, and then of course, some decisions that I would like to take away to inform my research. Oops, sorry. If we could have slide 3 then. The Mayor and Council, of course, you wish to establish a revised compensation schedule for 2023. And to do so, the first step is to set a target placement with comparable, vis-a-vis comparable municipalities, identify those local governments that are comparable. And then, as Mr. Earl said, then I will go away and conduct a survey with those identified comparator governments. I'll go through the steps and provide options to help you determine the targets, compensation, and the governments to be surveyed. So the next slide. Principles, a little bit of background before we talk about these 4 principles. It's very important to, when you're beginning a survey like this, to identify where in general you wish your compensation to fall vis-a-vis your comparator governments. That's referred to as target placement. And you want to have a general objective goal on that so that you don't have any conscious or unconscious influence from any particular comparator that you may know. So the way to go about that is to consider the broad compensation principles up here to help you select that general goal. For example, is the objective to be in the lower end of the field, of the spectrum? Is it to be right in the middle? And there's a couple of ways to be right in the middle. Is it to be above the middle, but not as high as the highest level? Just to figure out where you'd like to be in that general spectrum. And then the factors, when you're thinking about that general placement, the factors to consider are the fiscal responsibility to your constituents, the recognition of the level of responsibility and the type of work that you're required to do in your positions, recognition that you'll be working alongside elected officials from other governments that are adjacent to you when you're working on regional boards and committees, side by side, other elected officials. And the ability to attract and retain elected officials with the qualifications that are best suited to provide excellent governance for the city. So certainly it's recommended that you consider all of those factors when you think about your general placement, whether you wish to be in the middle, a little bit above the middle, or on the lower end. So that's the general part of it. So the next slide, we'll talk about the more specific. How do we get there? There's two main methods of establishing a target goal. The first one is utilizing the mean, which is the average. And the second one is utilizing a percentile. So before we talk too much about what each one of those would do for you and the considerations for each one of those, I'd like to just go over a couple of definitions first, so we're all talking about the same thing. And whenever I refer to an observation, that is one piece of data. So when, if you went next door to View Royal and they gave me a compensation for their mayor and a compensation for their councillors, that would be two observations. So anytime I talk about that, it's the number of observations is one piece of data from one other organization. So the mean is the average. It's taking, if you look at one position, it takes all the data for that one position, all the compensation, adds it all together, divides it by the number of observations that we had for that. So you have 10 municipalities indicating the compensation for their mayors, you divide it by 10, and that is the average, just what we all learned many, many years ago. The percentile is the value that expresses a percentage that is equal to or below. So if you go, for example, the 75th percentile, it would mean that the figure chosen has 75% either at it or below it. The 50th percentile has 50% either at it or below it. So it is included in the lower part, not in the higher part, if that's making sense. The median, of course, is another way of looking at the middle, but it is very different than the mean. The median is what we call P50. It falls in the middle of the series. So if you had 10 observations, the median would be number 5 because there are 5 above and it's included in the 5 below. So that's the median, and the median may be very different than the mean, depending on what the spread is of the observations that are collected. Am I making sense so far? Go to the next slide. So what's behind choosing all of these options? If you choose the mean, the average, you clearly are saying you want to be in the middle of the road, sort of nice and safe in the middle of the road approach. You're not wanting to be on the high end of the spectrum. You're not wanting to be on the low end of the spectrum. You're just going to go in the middle. You should bear in mind that you won't be selecting, highly unlikely that you would be selecting a rate that would be shared by any other municipality because it is in fact the average of them all. If you go to percentile, the 25th percentile emphasizes fiscal accountability primarily. It is on the lower end. It pays reduced recognition to the other factors of the work you're doing, the responsibility you hold, working alongside other elected officials from adjacent municipalities, and the ability to attract and retain quality candidates. If you go to the 50th percentile or the median, that is the most commonly utilized percentile in surveys of this nature. It allows you to be exactly in the middle of the spectrum. So if you survey 20 people or 20 municipalities, local governments, the high end, the low end, you're going to have 10 above you, and you will be the 10th. You'll be the 11th from the top. So 10, you're part of the 10 below. So you are selecting the municipality that is in the middle, not the number that is in the middle. That actually is, again, it gives a good rationale of, you're not overreaching, you're just sort of being fair, recognizing all of the principles up there quite equally. It's worthy of note that the median can be influenced by the geographic distribution of the comparators that are chosen. If you go into the interior or the northern part of British Columbia, most of the governments are a little bit smaller. They tend to have lower cost of living. Everything is a little bit more reduced there. So if you have a lot there, the median may be a little bit lower to reflect those. So conversely, 75th percentile, where 75% of the local comparator governments are at or below that level. If that was chosen, that is a way to sort of balance if there are more rural governments involved than here. Like you're somewhat rural, but if it was primarily rural in the interior or northern part of BC that was chosen as your comparators, choosing 75% would balance that out a little bit. It does also signal a stronger recognition of the nature of your work and the amount of responsibility that you have. And it's likely to better attract and retain councillors that are exhibiting the skills that you wish to have to run your city. Since it remains 25% below the highest comparator, it also reflects a moderate amount of fiscal responsibility. So that's the percentiles, the target options. So if we could have the next slide. So once we look at whether you want the mean or which one of the percentiles as your goal, your general goal, then the mean or the percentile, then we need to look at how we find the comparative governments. How do we go about finding the best ones to say, we want to compare ourselves vis-a-vis these ones. And so the two components to that are the location and similarity of the governments. And then second is how many do we want? So location and similarity in your report, it's A to H, 8 different factors to be considered, and I'll walk through them one by one. Some of them I think are very essential to be included, others may not be. So population is the first one, and it is one of the most basic parameters. It is virtually always included in this kind of a survey. You want to look at populations. How close is that population to you? Do you compare to Vancouver, or do you compare to something a little bit smaller than that? But because there are very few cities or towns that have really, really close populations to you, and there's other factors to consider, I recommend that you look at populations that are either plus or minus 75% of Colwoods. That gives you a little bit of range, and it will allow for more municipalities to be included in the sample. There are 3 municipalities in the Greater Victoria region that have more than 75% of your population. However, I would recommend that those be included as part of the economic region, which is one of the other factors there. So I'll get to that in a moment. The geographic area, if you take the geographic area in combination with population, that gives you, as a rule, a very strong match. With the geographic area combined with population will give you a rough approximation of your rural-urban blend. So again, I would really strongly recommend that. In some cases, if a municipality, especially if they're in the interior or the north, they may want all urban or just rural. But if the population and the geographic area is involved, I don't think it's necessary to also choose that it must be one of the others. It's pretty much going to give that to you if you use the population and the geographic area. The economic region is generally considered to be a highly valuable one. It's your cost of living, really. The cost of operating as well as the cost of living in an area varies drastically, as we know, throughout British Columbia. And when surveys of this nature are concerned, it's generally most common to focus on Vancouver Island, primarily in the south end and the central end of Vancouver Island have got the closest you're going to find for the economic region. Especially if you combine it with smaller municipalities within that 75 plus or minus 75% range. So I would certainly recommend economic region as one of the factors to be considered. Then operating budget, annual expenditures, and service responsibilities are the next two, and I'd like to kind of talk to them together. If you look at the operating budget, it's a useful basis for comparability because it really reflects the scope of the responsibilities and the duties that you all have that come from, does the municipality have fire, sewer, roads, parks, recreation, all of those kinds of things. They are reflected in the operating budget. So if you choose the operating budget, then specifying that it must have all those services is less important. It's slightly redundant. So the operating budget is definitely something I would want to be considering. Next is proximity to other local governments. As I mentioned earlier, that's an important consideration. When you work in the Capital Regional District, you're going to be on boards and committees working alongside elected officials from other municipalities. If those officials are earning a considerable amount of money more than you are, they're compensated a little bit more than you, but they're doing the same work, that can be a dissatisfier. If, on the other hand, those local governments have been included in the survey, then you're going to have a sense of fairness about this. They were included, we know where we stand vis-a-vis, we know why we're there, and then that can actually turn into a satisfier. But again, as with operating budget and service responsibilities, proximity to local governments is very close to the economic factor when you come to the Capital Regional District. So I think if the economic region is considered, then we don't need to worry about this one in and of itself. It will, again, pretty much take care of itself. It certainly could be, but it's somewhat redundant. Last is the number of councillors sharing the duties. And as you know, some towns only have 4 councillors as opposed to 6. It's more important for those smaller ones to be able to say, you know what, we've only got 4 councillors, there's 6 everywhere else. So we do a little bit more of the work, therefore the compensation should be slightly different. For you, I don't think that's something that you need to consider. So if we could have the next slide. So when you look at the number of comparators, there's really 2 different types of surveys to look at. And this one that we're about to embark on would be the benchmarking one to set the basis for the future. This is where you want to start off with. So for a benchmarking survey, you generally want a few more. It's generally between 15 and 20 comparative municipalities is valid. Then after that first year, after that benchmarking, many municipalities will then move to between 5 and 10, and they'll pick, you know, the low end and the high end of that spectrum and a couple of them in the middle. But there's no need to survey all 20 of them every year, if that's where you want to go on an annual basis. But for a benchmarking survey, it's best to go for the 15 to 20. So now I think it's really time for the decisions. So there's 3 decisions for you to move forward on the process. It's put in terms of recommendations presented. And if you'd be good enough for the next slide. That council, oh, no, sorry, the last one. Nope, we have to pick the mean, the percentile first. So one back. Yeah, thank you. So if you think back to a few minutes ago when I was talking about the mean or the 25th, the 50th, the 75th, or above the 75th percentile, and your general principles the fiscal responsibility, the work you're doing, the amount of responsibility you have working alongside other local governments, and the ability to attract and retain councillors that have the qualifications to operate and guide your city well. Those are the four ones that say, where do you want to be in the, do you want to be in the middle? Do you want to be in the low end? Do you want to be just above the middle, but not as high as the top? That general one. Then from there, we can pick one of these.
Just a quick question, Joe. I know some reluctance of some of the council right now, you know, they felt, God, this is really awkward because it's self-serving in
Yes.
a way, right? And so there's a lot of awkwardness and so I'll speak and I find it awkward myself, but it's okay because you know, the main goal of this is to have a proper process to do this. You know, we need a proper process. So I guess what I was going to ask you is, you're the expert. You've done this over and over and over and over, and we're a bunch of neophytes here, to tell you the truth. And I guess maybe you can hold our hands through this a little bit and say, this is what your work with councils, this is what they do, I guess, is what we're expecting, because it takes a little bit of the self-serving stuff out of this right
Yeah,
now.
for sure.
Out of the equation, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Well, as I said, it's by far the most common to have the P50, the median, the 50th percentile. That is very, very common. It's defensible. It's middle of the road. It certainly demonstrates fiscal accountability. It's not saying we want to be at the top. We don't want to be as well paid as a councillor from City of Victoria. But it's recognizing that you do work alongside them that is highly important, and you have a lot of responsibility. So I think that's quite defensible. Occasionally, councils will want to go higher to the 75th percentile if their survey has primarily been a very small rural group, so that their data, all of their observations are on the lower end of the spectrum to sort of counterbalance that. Or if council and senior staff in some cases are feeling that the collective bargaining process has moved the staff so far forward that there's a lot of compression. And it's again, is a bit of a dissatisfier. So those are the circumstances in which council may really look at a higher than 50%. But otherwise, I would certainly suggest the 50%.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to reiterate what you said, this is very awkward. And I think I'll admit, I was a little bit surprised to see this presented this way on the agenda. My understanding was that you were hired to, as the expert, to be presenting your recommendation to us, so that we weren't so much giving you the direction of where we think we need to go. So I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way, but I'm a little bit confused, to be honest. I really did think that you were coming with the recommendation for us to make a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Day. Oops. Sorry.
That's okay.
I got you wrong.
It's all good. It is awkward. And there hasn't been any way that it hasn't been awkward, to be quite honest, because I've done it a few times. And I've been here for 20 years. So what concerns me is that in our awkwardness, because it's very difficult to speak up for yourself at this table. I'm not here for myself. I'm here for my community. And I'm sure everybody else is here for the community too. But we've tried it a few different ways.
And I've watched other communities also struggle with this issue. I remember when Langford went through this. I remember when the school district did it. And it's always a little bit awkward. And the more I think awkward we feel about it, I think the worse a job we do. Because we really are dancing around it. So we tried to handle that before in the past on this council by making the recommendation at the end of our term for a future council. That didn't work out the last time, so here we are. And I think that my observation is that most of the councils who are close to us geographically, that we would compare ourselves to, have had the same awkward difficulties. And probably all of us, with relatively few exceptions, maybe actually no exceptions, I'm not sure, are underpaid for the work that we do. My interest in doing this work is not for my own paycheck or that of my fellow councillors here, as much as it is for future councillors, so that they can afford to be a councillor at the table here. A previous councillor spoke up when we were doing this review, and it was difficult for her to admit that the reason she's no longer on council is because she couldn't afford to give up that much time away from work.
Yes.
And there's a lot of sacrifices there. So I just quickly, like honestly, just did it while we were listening to your presentation. I added up the number of hours that I've spent in meetings in January this year. Do you want to know the number? No prep time, 45 hours of meetings this month. So we can't just, be altruistic and take one for the team and, not address the question in this room. Because if I don't address the issue, then I leave that very hard problem for someone in the future to figure out. How are we going to get someone who's qualified, maybe even actually not retired, to sit around this table and help the community grow? So I really love that we're taking this on. I hope that we can shake off the very personal nature of it and make a decision that will serve Colwood well. But when you tell me that we need 15 to 20 locations to benchmark, and even though we live on this island that has quite a lot of municipalities on it, finding people who are communities that are as similar to us as possible. Are we going to be able to find 15 to 20 communities to benchmark against? Is that difficult from your perspective?
Well, that's why there's the plus or minus 75% on both the operating budget and the population.
Okay.
So because there are a lot that are comparable in many, many ways, but having that range will allow us to bring in those comparables. So certainly we can get 20 comparables. They're not going to be identical, but they're going to be very similar. And that's really what we're looking for. If we get very similar, and some of them are very similar, but they're larger and they're going to receive higher compensation. I'm sorry, I should have gone through the mayor in my answer. I beg your pardon. Then others will be quite a bit less and lower compensation because they're a little bit less similar. And it does average out because what we want is that range. so that we can see where you are in the middle of it. And if I may I answer the earlier concern too?
Certainly.
I think it is always awkward. It's very awkward for anyone to say, to be a part of what their own compensation should be. I think my understanding was that this was to be brought to you because you wanted to be transparent about it, not to have an in-camera session or making a decision where your constituents might say, gee, we didn't have a chance to say anything or think anything about that. So kudos for the transparency. It is unique. It's not something I've been asked to do before. I've often been asked to deal with sort of subcommittees, input from the CAO and from after consultation with council, but it is quite unique and I really respect you very much for doing that.
Perfect. And just wanted to ask, I guess I'm a little bit lost just at the moment because it's an emotional subject. I'm just trying to figure out, we're not going to have any trouble then probably finding our benchmark probably within Vancouver Island, or will we need to
There
go
may be a
farther?
couple outside of Vancouver Island, but the focus will be on Vancouver Island.
Perfect. And what you need from us tonight is both how many we're going to benchmark against and also what range we're looking to get at, whether we're at the 50th, the 75th, or that's what you're looking at.
Yes,
So I'm just going to suggest then for discussion that I think because this is a benchmarking effort and not necessarily, we're not maybe just going to race right to the, to the conclusion that this provides, but it's going to be a goal for our council to get to. I would like to suggest that we consider the 75th percentile, because I'm very aware that every community struggles with this. And I don't think I've hardly spoken to a community that doesn't feel that they're not really compensating their councils for the time and the effort that it takes. And I really do hope that this will bring that. If council's decision is different than that, I'm okay with that. But that's my rationale for the 75th percentile, is we're trying to figure out how to compensate councillors in Colwood in the future in a way that's defensible, transparent, and can be followed up on in future years.
And if I may, through the mayor, your point about being able to attract new councillors, I think is also a very valid one. Most councils really struggle with that. I know a number of younger people that are struggling with families and daycare and they would really like to volunteer their time and they would have to take a reduced paying job in order to serve on a council. But they may have incredible skills to offer. So that's what I meant in terms of thinking about how to recruit and retain the people that you really want to be able to guide your municipality.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Day. Mr. Earl, just a question. Do you want a motion for each of these questions that are being asked then? Is that how we want to handle this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there are kind of three fundamental questions.
Yes.
The second question has A through H subcomponents. And so for each of those, for question one, we're looking for one. Question two, A through H, either affirming the direction in each of them or isolating going through. And question three, affirming the 15 to 20 comparative.
So is it an actual motion, or do we just have a show of hands and get the majority?
Ultimately, Ms. McDonald needs to leave with the direction.
Right.
And a motion is the cleanest way for historical direction to be captured.
So we'll come back to you, Councillor Day, in a second. Councillor Jordison?
I just want to say that I was a little disappointed to see this report this evening. I believe that we had approved to walk back the original amount prior to, I don't even know how to explain this, but the prior amount that was determined by the last council, so that we could follow a proper process that was explained by the UBCM, outlined by UBCM, I guess. And for me to sit here and select a target of compensation and comparators is frankly not something that we should be doing for our own pay. It's supposed to be done from the past council, and I realize the situation we're in, but I, quite frankly, and no respect to you, I thought that was your job, and I thought that's what you are going to come back to the table with. So for us to be having to make these decisions tonight, I don't take lightly, and I don't, I just don't feel that this is appropriate, and I feel that this is just politicizing this even more than it needs to be, and that there's some sort of interference in this process. So I just want to just express that I'm really disappointed with where we're at tonight. But in regards to what Councillor Day has suggested, I would second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if I may,
Yes, please.
in the report, I always will say what the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 75th is, as well as the mean. So you know that, but it's very important for you to set your goal before you see that, so that you don't have any conscious or unconscious influence when you actually see the numbers. So that's why I'm asking you to set your goal now, so that you don't say, oh, that was higher or lower than I thought. You know, think about where you want to be vis-a-vis your colleagues. Do you want to be in the middle? Do you want to be just a little bit above the middle, but not at the top? Or do you want to be in the lower quadrant? That's an important philosophical approach for council. And generally, councils do come up with that and give me that kind of instruction before I go off and do a report, whether it comes via the CAO or how it comes. I'm generally given, this is the number of comparators we want. Go and find the comparators, and this is the goal that we want to have, and then I go off and do it.
Okay. Yeah, so that was my impression, that you would have provided 25, 50th, and 75th percentiles.
Yes.
Right? So,
but it's important to pick where you want to be first.
I got you. Now
That's right.
Okay. Councillor Grove, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to, I know we're here because the past council suggested that we accept an 85% pay increase. We decided that, thank you very much, but that was unconscionable. So here we are, admitting we're not paid enough. Probably in that, and with this process, admitting that we are going to have kind of an untimely percentage increase, given the tough times, people struggling with house payments, with inflation, etc. And so I guess that's where the awkwardness comes from. Myself personally, I don't really mind talking about this because I'm retired, and when I declared for the election, I thought 16,000, wow, it's not much, but hey, it's better than nothing. I didn't know, right? To be quite honest, but I'm in a fortunate position. I have a question. I do have a question though, in that regard, about the idea that more pay draws better people. Is this true? And why is it true?
That's a very deep question.
Yeah.
A lot of people will assume that higher pay is the only thing that's going to attract new people. No, it's not. A lot of it is the quality of the job, the quality of the work, the intrinsic reward is one of the highest factors. However, the compensation, the amount of money does come into play, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, when you're working side by side. If you think about in staff generally will have, you know, I'm over here doing this and there's someone over here who's doing a job that's quite equivalent to mine. It's not the same job, but it's quite equivalent. So in a job evaluation plan, they'll wind up about the same money, same compensation. If you're thinking about governments, here you are, there's your neighbor over here doing basically the same thing. You're working together on some sort of joint committee and they're making twice what you are. Then it becomes a dissatisfier. And that's when it's important.
Okay,
But as I said earlier, if you've said to yourself, if you can say to yourself, then, yeah, I know that they're making more than I am, but that was considered when we made our decision. So there's a reason they're making more than I am, and I'm good with that. So then it becomes a satisfier.
okay, so I have from the start of this thing gone straight to it myself personally. And that is, I'd like to know what all the comparators would give me an answer of 24,000 a year, which is roughly half the split between where we were and where the old suggestion was. View Royal had a 45% increase. I think for many of the same reasons from what I've read, and it was passed and there they are. I think we're a comparable place. We're close by. They're smaller. We have more work, so maybe we should get a bit more. I don't even know how I even begin to think about that, no matter how many statistics or how many data points I go through. So I'm keen to know where we end up at 24,000. Given that, I will support whatever the council decides. I personally have a hard time picking. I would say 50th because you suggested that was a common thing. I would say the comparators sounds great. A to H. Let's do it. And let's pick 20 or 15 municipalities. Let's do it. You're the expert. Let's just pick it, do it, go. And then you come back with the numbers and I'll only peek at the first one until later. And because I personally am not looking for any more money to do this job, but fully cogent of the fact that there are people on this council and past councils that could use more money. And there may be good people drawn out by more money, but there also may be some evil scumbags out there looking to make a wackadoodle for doing whatever, because there is nobody watching us here. There's nobody saying, aha, service review time. I want, step into my office. We don't have anybody judging us every 4 years. That's a nice long go, right? The staff here, they go through their annual reviews. They've got a job performance expectations. We have none of that. So there's a lot of weird things to consider that I don't see in here, but that's okay. I'm willing to go with it. So anyway, that's my.
Well,
yeah.
I'm not a campaign manager, so I mean, if I was, I'd be saying that in order to win a campaign, you should actually say what expertise you have and leave it to the constituents to decide that. But that's a little out of my realm.
Yeah. Thank you.
I echo your feelings, Councillor Grove, unfortunately, but I'm okay. It's the will of council here, that's for sure. But the bottom line is that it's a process and we've got to follow a process. In actual fact, just to correct you a little bit, Councillor Jordison, this is actually this is the UBCM methodology. It is their methodology. Yeah. Yes. You can do it through a committee. You can do it through a consultant, or you can do it through combination of both, or you can do it with staff, but there's generally input into it by the councils. So I mean, that's not clear on that, like who decides which factors or anything like that. So and that's what I think that's the point that you're making, Councillor Jordison. I mean, I was surprised that we had to make these decisions ourselves. I thought you're the all singing and all dancing consultant. You were going to tell us, but that's fine.
I'm happy to give you recommendations.
Yeah, but that's fine.
But
I'm sure glad that just to bring some levity into this discussion, I'm sure glad you had my logic wasn't working here for a second there, because when you were saying that to get high quality people, you got to pay more. And I looked around and I went, oh my God, we got low quality people here. Including yourself, including myself. So no, that's funny.
no, not at all.
Yeah. Anyways, Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to comment on Mr. Grove. I think this is just a comment, but whether you're retired sitting at this table or, working parents at this table, I think, you know, I ran, or I had made the decision to run again for this election, knowing what the pay was coming into it. And I do think that an increase was certainly due, and I did state that in my campaigning. But I think that everyone at this table deserves to be paid a fair and reasonable wage for the work being done. And, you know, if the amount of hours already served are a sign of the times ahead, I'm glad that we're doing this now. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, to add a little levity, I think, Councillor Grove, if you think nobody's assessing you, there's some eyes out there and many more, I think. There you go. You know, I struggle with it as well, I think, like anybody. But, you know, I refer to the UBCM, the 2019 remuneration guide, where they say that, well, two things, and it's almost a juxtaposition, that they say there's arguably a tacit acceptance by those in office of some level of sacrifice, right? And we know that. I'm never going to get paid what I do in my private sector job. Far from it. We'd be talking far different percentages. And so inherently, I'm losing something by being here on a compensation side. I'm losing significant time with family, with friends, things like that. And time is money. I'm potentially losing career opportunities. It could be the same for others. So there is an acceptance of that level of sacrifice to some extent. But they go on to say in the same paragraph that remuneration, should, however, be fair as well as sufficient in order to mitigate any sacrifice required. So they're suggesting that it should mitigate sacrifice. Now, it's not going to mitigate my sacrifice. I know that. We'd be talking numbers that would anger quite a few people, I think. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I can make more elsewhere, as I think can almost everyone on this council, when you consider that the wage we make right now is the exact equivalent of a shift supervisor at the new McDonald's. I did the math. So we can do better and we should do better. But I think we have to try to find that balance between that tacit acceptance that there is a level of sacrifice that we've all inherently agreed to make. But then, you know, some very good points made is what is sufficient to mitigate that to some extent. And I think the important part is, and with all due respect, Councillor Day, I think in the past it's been a hot potato that has been passed forward year over year over year, employing different methodologies. Believe it or not, I give full credit to the last mayor and council for actually trying to make an effort to get this thing resolved. I had some issues with the process and I was very open and upfront about that, but the effort was there. And I think one of the overarching factor here beyond the dollar figure that we have to figure out is how do we set this in stone for future in a way that addresses these things so that you can attract good people and the question doesn't keep coming up. So that's as important as whatever number we arrive at here. And the UBCM suggests that in the third year of a 4-year term is when you make that decision. And the example I gave is last council. Had they made that decision in the third year and there was the outcry that there was from residents, they would have at least had an opportunity to revisit their process, maybe make some amendments, go do some other things. So, you know, certainly in our discussions that we're going to have here, and I'm ahead of that point, I would propose that we lock it down so that in the third year, we have those discussions for the term that will follow us, whether we're going to be at this table or not. That's my 2 cents.
So may I make a comment?
Please, thank you.
That was part of my, you know, the analogy I drew a little bit earlier. Yes, councillors, mayors tend to be lower paid. Yes. But you also look at it as if in work, in the workplace, the staff, they generally have some sort of job evaluation plan or something like that. Sometimes it's a survey. Sometimes it's a union who negotiates for them, but there's something that will say the components of that job are roughly equivalent in value to the components of this job over here. They're different jobs, but the components are equal. So they're going to be in the same pay band. When it comes to councils, really, it's your roles are like the equivalent roles in the next municipality and the next municipality. So while they may be a little lower, you still are looking, that's what the survey does. It looks to see how do you compare vis-a-vis those other ones, so that you're looking at the person next door doing the same job and thinking, well, yeah, I'm getting, it's fairness. It's all about the perception of fairness, given that it is a service position. That does help quite a bit. And that's what I meant in terms of the satisfiers and the dissatisfiers. Intrinsic reward from a human resources perspective is always the strongest motivator for someone. However, if there's enough dissatisfiers there, it's obliterated. So we need to keep the satisfiers out.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So my difficulty is I've just been here too long. Because, you know, I've done this a number of times. And I have to tell you that I make twice as much now as when I started 20 years ago. So, but it really, some of the disadvantages came home to me during the last term. When I made the decision, I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids when I started. I still have 3 kids. They don't live at home anymore. And you know, life marches on, and I chose to go back into the workforce during the day. And there is some real things that happen to you as a result of spending a long time being on council. You know, people have, you know, maybe some residual feelings about things that you've said when you were on council, when you go back into the job market. That is a reality. So I just think it's really, there's so much to doing this job, and it is so really important. One time when we did this, we tried to include a cost of living linked to the CPI, so that we wouldn't have to be in this awkward chair again. As it turned out, we're still in the awkward chair again. So I heard some things in other people's discussion here tonight. So I'm going to make a motion that we benchmark ourselves against 20 municipalities so that we get a wide sample, and that we aim for the 50th percentile. So I'm bringing it down from where I was wanting us to look at the 75th to try to ease this, to make it last longer. I hear my colleagues around the table wanting to pull back from that. So my motion is for the 50th percentile as our goal, knowing that I don't think we're looking to push this through and put this, whatever our report brings out, into effect immediately. I believe that we're going to look at a phased in approach so that towards the end of this term, we achieve that goal. And I'll leave it to, you know, that's not part of the motion. But I will just offer, is there one more decision point that we need?
The factors, yeah.
Oh,
7
A to
factors.
H.
So you said there were seven that were essential, correct?
No,
Okay,
no.
yeah, I see.
There was 8 listed, but not 7 that were essential. There was 1, 2, 3.
Okay, maybe are we going to have a discussion about those factors before we make that decision?
That's the next slide. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll leave my motion there at our how many municipalities and what percentile that we're going for the 50th percentile, and leave it at that so that we can have the discussion on which of these should make sense to people. And I hope that that will be transparent and inclusive for everybody.
Can I get a seconder on that motion? Okay, Councillor Grove. Discussion. Councillor Grove. Oh, sorry, that's my fault.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I add then the 4 recommended comparators?
Oh, we'll do that next because we
We
got.
can do it separate? We can't just add it on?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, let's just do it separate. So
Okay.
we'll just skip through this one and
Okay.
if it's okay with you. Okay. Any discussion on this? Oh, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, I having done a cursory look at municipalities on Vancouver Island, which I would say from about the midpoint, Comox Valley down would be the most logical. I don't believe that we have 20 that would be relevant. I'm happy to defer to you as the expert to provide more insight, but I would lean more towards 15 in order to provide better comparators. Otherwise, we're skipping over to comparable municipalities which start to bleed into the north, or potentially, southeast of the province. So I think in terms of economic conditions and things, it's pretty tough to draw parallels once you take a ferry.
Could I just make a suggestion to get halfway here? How about, could we give her a range then? Could we just say 15 to 20? Would you be okay with that amendment, friendly amendment?
I'm totally fine with the amendment.
Okay, friendly amendment. Any other discussion? Darn, gotta call the question, get over this. Councillor Jantzen.
I missed the button. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Take you out. Well, I was part of the last council, I guess, as was Councillor Day and our current mayor. I don't have a lot to say in this because I think I made my thoughts, aired my thoughts along the way, and I supported the previous process. And this council has taken a different direction. I'm fine with that. My only concern in this current motion here was I had the exact same thought as Councillor Ward, 15 or 20 on the island with the comparators. The give or take factor is fine, but then we choose the 50th percentile. All of a sudden, I'm going to throw down a bit of a guarantee here that we're going to see some awkwardness where we end up behind some community of 10,000 people that might be right next door to us. I'm just guessing or spitballing here, and I don't have any science or math to support this, but do you see any problem with that as outlined by Councillor Ward and myself, as watering down the sample to such a degree that we do find that there is an awkward outcome?
If there are a number of municipalities that are considerably smaller than you or more rural, then yes, that was when I suggested then you can always compensate for that by going for the 75th percentile. In order to gain 20, there may be one or two from on the other side of the water that would be considered comparable that I can find. But I can easily look for, try to find 20, realize that if I can only find 15 that are comparable, that's satisfactory. And I can give you a recommendation as to which ones are too small, which ones are too big, that sort of thing.
Thank you for that, because I mean, I do look across the pond at White Rock, and I draw a lot of similarities with us, this community, as far as the geography. Yes, they have some nice towers up on the hill, and we're not quite there yet, but they're very similar in size and population and geography. So I would hope we're not restricting ourselves to the island just because we're here, that we're looking a little more widely for specific comparators that might be on point, like the White Rock.
If I may,
Please.
I think you probably heard me say it's not uncommon, or it is very common to keep it on the island and on the central and southern island. It's not always, of course. I've done lots where we're going vastly afield into the interior and the north to try to find really directly comparable, but then I try to work in a multiplier effect for the economic environment. So there's always a downside, but so we'll just sort of try to find the ones that are the best match for you. And if I also may, and in response to the question about what to do in between, a number of surveys will also ask the respondents, what do you do in between? And it is very common, certainly in my experience, generally I'll find that they say in between, they give a CPI, either the Canadian, the Victoria, the BC, they're all a little bit different, but they will choose a consumer price index to give themselves that kind of increase on an annual basis, and then have the non-benchmarking, the smaller survey done every 3 years. That's very standard practice. So it kind of keeps you on a trajectory that you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question then. So the motion is for 50% percentile and between 15 to 20 comparators. Okay. And all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, so Councillor Jordison, Councillor Jantzen, and Councillor Olson. Okay. Next, the parameters.
Great. So the next slide in front of you is all the different factors that we can consider when looking for comparators. So to run through them again, the ones I recommended for sure were population and geographic area. You don't have to follow my recommendations, but I didn't recommend specifying urban, rural, or a blend because that's addressed with the population and geographic area. I did recommend the economic region. Which is really the capital regional district. The operating budget and expenditures definitely recommended. But with that plus or minus 75, the same as the population. Service responsibilities, I didn't recommend if you choose the operating budget. Proximity over other governments, sorry, proximity to other local governments is not necessary if we choose economic region. And the number of councillors is, I wouldn't recommend that for you. So the ones I would recommend are population, geographic area, economic region, operating budget, annual expenditures. And that's it. So 4 of the 8.
Councillor Janssen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. In the interest of time, I would like to move a motion that encompasses all of the recommendations from our compensation professional.
A, B, D, and E.
Thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Second, Councillor Grove. Discussion. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for you. The UBCM 2019 guide also indicates growth rates as they list 1, 2, 3, 5 key factors to consider, 4 of which are covered here, but the 5th is growth rates. Is that encompassed in the A, B, D, and E or no?
It's from the geographic area, there's a fair amount of that. The economic region too is a fair amount of that. We're in it's very difficult to add that. It has value for sure, but if you add it on its own, it can eliminate other factors that I think are probably more crucial.
Would you not wait something like that? I'm just curious because they've made it pretty clear that those were their key factors. And like I said, that's the only thing that's differentiated from what you said here. So I don't know why it would be included if it has such a negative ramification.
It's not a terribly negative ramification. It's just not as strong. I think it has more aesthetic appeal than real. I could certainly add it if you'd like it to be.
Just a question. At the end of the day, if well, you know what? I'll move to amend the motion to include growth rates, but potentially with a asterisk that it should be weighted at a lower amount or just included for interest's sake.
Second. Okay, Councillor Day. Oh, please, absolutely, Councillor Day, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because that has been one of the things that has made me kind of feel uncomfortable with other comparators, not on salaries, but in other issues that we've looked at in the past. We've been compared with North Saanich, for example, before, who is very much kind of like another Metchosin. You know, there, and a good portion of the work that we're dealing with at our table is a result of development. So I think it's appropriate to look at that because it directly impacts the kind of work that we're doing. So thank you.
No other. So we just want to do a friendly amendment on that? So we just vote on one, okay? If that's okay, just a friendly amendment on that. Okay, and I'll call the question. Everyone looks like they're getting tired. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
All finished.
The
Thank
last
you.
slide, if you would, then please. Thank you very much for the opportunity,
Thank you.
and I will see you all
So-
again soon.
Oh, yeah, let's, we'll take a 3-minute health break here. I think this is what I'd like to plan to do is, I would like to do, hopefully Councillor Jantzen's item. I'm gonna recommend or have someone recommend we defer 10.3, 10.4. There's no way we're gonna do it in time and we'll do bylaws. Okay. Sorry, you wanna go ahead, Councillor Jantzen? Sorry, you want to make a motion right now?
That we defer it right now.
Okay, please. Yeah, I'm very sorry, Royal Beach, for you coming out tonight, but there's no way we're gonna do this tonight. So we're gonna defer 10.3 and 10.4. We should be able to do the bylaws quickly. And so seconder on that, Grove, and all in favor? Okay, all, anyone opposed? Okay, we're good. Just a 3-minute break, health break. No, that's me.
No, it's me.
Well, I don't know.
They're not far, they're somewhere. something wrong with that clock? How is it 9:30?
Councillor Jantzen, you are on.
Technically, I wasn't quite on, your worship. Thank you, and I will be brief, given the time this evening. And I appreciate the indulgence of my council members here with my motion that's before us today. The reality is we don't know what we don't know. All I'm seeking is information. That's what I don't expect us to hire at this point, people to study this for us. I think this is within our purview. And I would say that we started down this road as the mayor and Councillor Day would recall with the young man whose names escapes me that went to Prince George there. He started going down this road and we started having a look at this, and then it just kind of ended abruptly, I think, after his departure. So I do want to reinvigorate this. What I find concerning is if you go to some of the major platforms, whom I won't name, but you play around, and I encourage you to go. And I figured this out. The most prominent one, if you go in and you, I don't even think you can search directly for Colwood, but if you do Victoria and you move the map over to, move the map over to our lagoon area, I encourage you to do it. The key is to not put any dates in. When you put dates in, it carves out all those that are already booked. But if you tick off that you're flexible with your dates and you pick, say, 3 months, and then you look at the map again and you zoom in and zoom out, because it all depends how far in you go and how far you back out. Again, if you play around with that, I think you would be shocked at how many there are in our community. And go around to the different areas, because Royal Bay has quite the proliferation, and the lagoon area does as well. It concerns me that I think we're growing in this regard. Some communities around us, many communities around us and on the island and across the province have gone to a strict regulating, a very strict regime with regard to regulations. I don't know if that's what we need. That's what I would like to at least ascertain. I do believe, though, I'll give you a for instance, that the District of Oak Bay is now banned short-term rentals. I've spoken with Mayor Murdoch, and he's told me that that's the will of council, and that's the new bylaw. And now they're moving to the actual regulatory stages coming up sometime soon here. So they're going to start enforcing it. So I'm not saying that I'm prejudiced one way or the other, because the District of Summerland, we heard at the UBCM presentation, they chose to regulate and licensing, offer a licensing regime, a mandatory license, and then it needed to be owner occupied, and it was subject to inspection basically of city staff, and they felt that worked for them. I don't know what works for us or what we even need. So with the District of Oak Bay banning them, what does this mean for us? I wonder, might be the cynic in me, but does this mean that people who are operating these facilities or homes are looking for opportunities out here in the West Shore to conduct their business in a non-regulated environment, because we have nothing? So I just wonder, as it tightens up in one jurisdiction, if that has an impact on us. I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to. So in essence, that's my motion, is really to seek the information to understand if there is a problem, and if we do agree at this table that we believe there is a problem, then how do we go about fixing that or regulating that for the future? I would say, I've had some great conversations with the mayor and Tofino. It's a bit of a different animal, because they are a resort community, and places for their staff members to stay is a challenge. And they took some strict approach on that, which was all based on 2018 research that was done at the UBCM and FCM level. So there has been some work done at higher levels of government to guide communities on this discussion as a baseline. So I don't think these things add to a sense of community within a community. You have a bunch of people staying for a night or two, and they don't pay taxes, and off they go with their luggage. Are we better served opening up some of those units to the market for rentals for young people or young families? I don't know, but I would like to take a decision on this as a group. And however, the backside to that is clearly there's a need here that's being filled, because these platforms are super popular. So again, I think there's multiple ways to slice and dice this. So let's get the information and let's come up with a decision. So that is my motion, Your Worship, as outlined here. I'll go ahead and make that.
Can I get a second just so we can get this discussion? Okay, Councillor Ward seconds it. Discussion, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, and appreciate Councillor Jantzen bringing this forward. As he well knows, it's a vested interest of mine as well. So number of issues to consider here. We just made a change to accessory dwelling units. I'd remind council of that. So we've opened up the potential for more of this. We did so though, and I believe, at least anyway, to address affordability for first-time homeowners and others, and frankly, second and third-time homeowners who are just looking to supplement with carriage houses and things like that. There's a housing crisis, and that gentle infill is advantageous for those people. Myself, I'm the president of the strata in which I live, and we increasingly see more and more strata or multifamily properties in the housing component in Colwood. And we banned short-term rentals because of specific issues. We have a community with families, small children. And we had an absentee owner who owned the unit from Vancouver who began to use it as an Airbnb. And next thing you know, you've got people speeding through the townhome complex. No regard to noise issues. Every weekend's a party. So we took the steps to eliminate that. And, you know, I hear it, I have anecdotal evidence, someone who works for Ecom, who's a dispatcher, and Councillor Jantzen, you might know this as well, that particularly in urban areas, city of Victoria, but it's creeped into Langford pretty significantly. Organized crime and low-level drug dealers and people traffickers and the rest are using short-term rentals as a means to avoid incriminating themselves in their own home addresses and things. So that's increasingly an issue. But ultimately, just the housing crisis and the accessory dwelling unit component alone is enough for me to strongly come out against short-term rentals in Colwood. I don't believe we need it here. We are not a community like Tofino. We're not reliant on that. Victoria has certainly regulated it, but they've got heavy pressure from Tourism Victoria to sell as many beds as they can. So I would like to propose an amendment to Councillor Janssen's motion in order to potentially expedite something that, in addition to doing the research on it, that staff also research comparative or regional bylaws that regulate and or restrict short-term rentals, so that if we do elect to make a move in that regard, we already have that information in hand as well, and we could potentially take action. Thank you.
Okay, well, friendly amendment. Did you get that, Marcy? Yes, so can I get a second? Councillor Grove. Great, thank you. Any other discussion? Oh, Councillor Day, sorry.
That's okay. It's getting late. Just very quickly, I haven't paid attention to this issue for a while because when I first investigated this quite a few years ago at UBCM, the advice that was coming forward was a caution to homeowners to not do Airbnb or VRBO, whichever platform you pick. Because without the appropriate approvals on your insurance, it can void your house insurance, which can get you into plenty of trouble with your mortgage as well. So it is an issue, I think, for Colwood. It will definitely reduce the amount of rentals that are available within Colwood. They can make more money renting them out occasionally than renting them all the time, and be able to reserve the unit that they own for some times when they need to be here for whatever reason, and then release them to the market when they don't need to be here, sort of thing. We have lots of people who have consulting or jobs that would take them away for lengthy periods of time. It isn't that there's no circumstances under which this could be acceptable. In Langford, for example, they do have their hotel. I can't remember its name right now, but yeah, that does, it really helps people who are waiting for new builds. For example, when you're buying a new house, you don't know when it's going to be ready. You still got to sell your other house in order to be able to do your mortgage commitments and everything else. So you still can end up in that position of, this year it was months at a time that people were waiting to get into their new builds. So I think there is potentially some locations and some areas where we might find uses like this to be acceptable in Colwood, but certainly we need to know about them and consider what the implications are for our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a definition of short-term rental. How many days is that? Like, I understand like Airbnb, VBRO is short-term rental. Less than a month. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we're gonna move on to 11.1 bylaws. I have a motion that the following sewer bylaws be given first, second, and third reading. Colwood Main Sewer Local Area Service Establishment and Loan Authorization Bylaw number 598, 2002, Amendment 145. Councillor Olson, Councillor Grove, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, carried unanimous. Bylaw number 1968, Building Bylaw Amendment, Energy Conservation and GHG Emission Reduction Adoption. Recommendation that the bylaw 1968, cited as Building Bylaw number 977, 2008, Amendment number 6, Energy Conservation and GHG Emission Reduction Bylaw number 1968, 2023 be adopted. Motion, please. Councillor Day, Councillor Ward, second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Day, thank you very much. Anyone opposed?